Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is Tuesday night, so it's time for me, Brendan, and him over there, Brandon, to talk about the Seattle Seahawks. The Seattle Seahawks, where we need the draft to be bumped up to tomorrow so we can get Will Anderson now, apparently, because it's the only thing that can save this defense.
I suppose so.
Yeah, and yeah, we got to talk about this last game. Obviously, not the result we wanted, not the outcome we wanted. Las Vegas rolls in, and the man with one calf puts a historic beatdown on our defense. And even though we may not like it, we got to dissect it. We got to talk about it. So I am Seahawks Brendan Nelson. And as I said, I am joined as I am multiple times a week by Brandon of the Hawks Nest. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, man. I guess it's one mighty calf. You know, it's a big, mighty single calf. The other one's ailing, but that one's good enough for two, I guess.
Right. So, Seahawks lose in overtime, 40-34. It was a interesting game, exciting game, went back and forth, a lot of lead changes. So, on that level, this team is still fun, but I think the general takeaway is that we have as a team regressed significantly back to where we were in week 3, week 4, week 5, where we looked like a Big 12 college football team where it seems like the defensive strategy is just let them score so you can get back on your offense back on the field quickly so you can build rhythm. We're back to that. After a solid month of feeling like we had moved beyond that, we're back. So obviously the defense is going to be the main focus because you can clearly point to them as being the reason why that game went the way that it did. The offense scores a lot of points. Had the opportunity to close that game maybe at the end there, didn't do it. We can talk about that a little bit as well, but let's not focus on the little things when we've got this big honking thing right in front of us. So just immediate takeaway from that Las Vegas Raiders loss. What you got?
Well, definitely, like you said, the defense is quickly. I mean, it's something to see, Brendan, because you have a defense for that first 4 weeks is the worst in the league, and then for another 4 week period, it was the best in the league. So it's just a crazy, and now you're going right back to the worst in the league. I mean, there is no middle ground right now with it. It is, as I was saying on my live stream, it's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, and you don't know who you're going to get week in and week out a little bit. The two things we'll hear about for why this and what I'm already hearing about, I'm sure you are as well. Last week, it was because you thought that the Buccaneers were going to pass so much. That's why the run game got gouged. That's what we were told. This week, what we're being told is that they afforded so much in the way of double teams towards Davante Adams that then took the one player away in run support, and then that just paved the way, opened the roads for Mr. Jacobs. I don't know that I really buy into that, or I would like to just counter a little bit on the respect of I don't know how their double team works to me. And let me just see where you stand on this. I understand a double team to be that I have one player playing tightly on a player and then the other player over the top to be right there on it. And if you're double teaming Davante Adams, then why is Mike Jackson playing 10 yards off in coverage almost every snap? Why is there no press at that point? That doesn't seem like a very what does the double team then accomplish exactly? He's there over the top as Quandre Diggs to protect in the very same position Mike Jackson's due to be in. I know on the initial interception that you saw, it looked like they were running a little double team on that, but there were so many completions you allowed to Davante Adams in this game that had to do with you dropping Mike Jackson on off coverage. So this is the reason we're given as the excuse as to why the running game went downhill in this, Brendan. I'm not quite on it. I can say that maybe it's a part of it, but this did come back down to your defensive line got their butts whooped. Frankly, we got another game as last week. Both of your lines of scrimmage got their butts whooped. And I'm not going to say that it's god awful or horrible, because a lot of what's going on here is going to be fixed as we move forward, beyond this season. Though what it means for this season, I think, is that you are going to have to kind of just get by right now on the interior of your offensive line and on the interior and on almost all of your defensive line, quite frankly. Outside linebackers, I think, are doing okay. I mean, they're not, Uchenna's not wrecking shop and Irvin's not wrecking shop, but the problem is those, I think I saw in the PFF grades, 4 of your bottom 6 of your defensive scores were the defensive linemen.
Yeah, and I've talked a little bit about this already this week, and I'm going to have to talk about it a little bit more. But it has to be said, there was a little bit of a change made this week in terms of the coaching, where we had 6 defensive linemen active in this game. We had 5 against Tampa. That was what didn't make sense to me. We had, I think, Monet and Adams inactive. In this game, you activated Monet, so you had 6 guys. And I will say there was a little bit of the 2-man front stuff that I didn't like, but my initial impression was that was not really the problem in that game. Like, they were running the ball on our 3-man fronts, no problem.
Yeah.
So I think the unfortunate reality we have to face here, and this isn't terribly surprising, these defensive linemen might just be bad. And I would say if every defensive lineman on the Seahawks suddenly got released into free agency, the only one who would get jumped on quickly would probably be Shelby Harris. The other guys would float around. Maybe one of them would be able to find a very specific little niche that they're able to fill, like a Poona Ford. If you can find a situation where a team is okay with a smaller one tech in a 4-3 defense, maybe a team would take Al Woods as like a backup because he's had a fairly successful career. But I think these guys are just bad. So obviously there is some criticism to go towards the coaching for remaining married to these 2-man fronts in neutral downs. But I have to say, I don't know if getting rid of that is necessarily going to fix it. Like, I think these defensive linemen just aren't very good. And that's the main takeaway I have to have right now. And that's not going to get fixed this year.
Yeah, I do like what Al Woods has brought. I just think he's 35 and you only get him for 30% of the snaps. So his effectiveness is reduced because of his age and how much you can play him. I agree with you on the Jefferson and I think Poona Ford's playing completely out of position. He's just not a fit into this defense. The Brian Monet completely on it with that one as well. I think Harris, would be fine if he was a rotational piece in here, if he was a guy coming through, but it's kind of being on the back of, you've got such bad play. He's probably playing a few too many snaps than you'd really want him to run rather than being more in that role. And I think he can be okay, but nobody's wrecking shop. Nobody's a problem. Part of the reason why you have so many double teams down on Cody Barton and Brooks at the second level have to do with the fact that offensive lines are not scared enough on any defensive players up front to feel they have to double team those guys. It's not a matter of you've got an initial double team that slides into Brooks. You're seeing the linemen come right off the ball and get into the linebackers, which is usually an indication that those offenses are just not worried about the defender getting penetration, the defensive lineman getting penetration. And to your point, this is just probably not something that's going to really get any better anytime soon. It's also why I've been at the front of the list of saying that defensive line, and for me, specifically Jalen Carter, is the best pick right now for where we probably will be selecting outside of, let's say, us going for quarterback. So I do still kind of land on that land where, like, Will Anderson would be great. I understand the love for him, but I don't think the issue right now is going to necessarily, or going forward, is going to be the outside linebacker position. I do think there's a lot of problems there up front with what you have to work with.
Yeah. I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, for the last 2 games have shown me edge rusher might be just as big a problem as the defensive line. And we are going to talk about specifically Daryl Taylor soon here. But either way, yeah, that front 7 in general, there just isn't a whole heck of a lot going on there. Now, I'm not going to say anything bad about Nwosu. He's proven that he's a good player. He's had a couple games in a row where he hasn't done a lot. I'm not going to say suddenly, oh, he's a bad player. Of course not. And like I said, I think Shelby Harris is a good player. But other than that, what else is really good about this front 7? Is Jordan Brooks good? I don't know. I'm kind of starting to feel like he's just going to be like a league average player, really good in some areas like his athleticism and speed. But I don't think he'll ever be more than average because he's so bad in coverage and he's a non-factor as a blitzer. I think that's mostly because we don't use him like that, but it is what it is. Like, I'm looking at Jordan Brooks and I just see like an average level player. What do you think?
I think he's a guy that, if you get into the nuance, to me, I think he's a really good run defender. Probably best suited to be a 4-3 middle linebacker when it's all said and done rather than a 3-4 linebacker. Look at the size difference of a guy like Devin White playing, and the way he can take on blocks coming at the second level versus Jordan Brooks. Now, Devin's a unique kind of cat for the position, but I'd argue you might need some more of those bigger guys at the middle linebacker position if you're going to ask him to have to take on those second level blocks. I think it is exactly. I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I do think it is what I thought it was on draft night with Jordan Brooks. I did a lot of look-see on that guy prior to him being picked. I did. I watched a lot of games and I studied on him. And here, the thing that stood out again in watching his tape was he was marvelous in the run game. He was way faster than you normally see as a middle linebacker. He can hit like a ton of bricks, but his coverage skills were not good, and his zone coverage skills were not good. And you're going to a zone-based defense. And the coverage skills are not, he's actually got okay coverage skills in man, but specifically in zone is where he really struggles. And going to a zone-based coverage team was not going to do him any favors, say nothing of playing out of position his first 2 years. It's just why I didn't like the pick. Does he have usefulness as a player? Yeah, it's hard to find guys that can tackle like he can tackle or can be as rangy as he can be rangy. If you have guys, I would argue, Brendan, maybe doing a little bit more up front, his game might look a little bit better. If more double teams were being commanded in front of him and he could be a little more cleaner to move around, that would be a lot more helpful. Part of the reason why I'd like to see him more in probably a 4-3 defense. But your bottom line point's really not that far off. I mean, at the end of the day, is he the best fit in this defense right now? Has he shown enough to say, let's put a long-term commitment to him? Probably not. But would I bring him back next year on the final year of his rookie deal and look to address the other middle linebacker position, look to address the inside first and foremost, look to go get a center? I mean, you got to prioritize stuff, I think. And even with all the picks we have and the money we have to spend, there's only so much you're going to be able to do in one offseason if you're looking to galvanize the team forward to becoming an elite team. And so I'm not your premise. I would not necessarily try to tear apart or anything. I think it's basically solidly in that ground. I would also say, look, you need linebackers that can cover in this day and age. I mean, or to some degree. And you saw in this game, he sometimes is just kind of lost out there, that there's not a feel for guys or where they're at. He gets killed on. It's going to be interesting this week to look for this, Brendan. This is something for you to check for as well as you watch this week to see how they attack him with flood zone concepts. Last year in the game at home, especially, that was how the Rams broke through offensively really through that game, was going right at him with the flood zone concepts to the point that they had guys holding hands, basically running routes up the field in that game just to run Jordan off with the first guy. And then the second guy could sit down right there. So that'll be the thing to kind of pay attention to, but I don't think it's getting better, Brendan. If it's been bad in college, he's in his third year now and it's still kind of a struggle. Is there hope that suddenly gets better at some point? I mean, isn't there more flashes of it being improved if it is going to get better and we're going to have that hope? I don't know. One other thing too, I think in regards to the edge, let's not undersell Boye Mafe first off. Now, he's a rookie who's been playing football for a very short period of time, and he's not getting a lot of snaps necessarily in pass rush situations because they are bringing Daryl Taylor out in those kind of situations. So he's out there doing the dirty work on early downs as a run defender, and then he's got to go sit on the bench to go give Taylor his snaps. Now, and Taylor, he is what he is. It's a disappointment. Again, I don't see a lot of growth there to be had in this game because he's not working off of a lot of his base. Everything seems to be built on quickness, speed, getting the edge, rounding the edge. And that's all he's got. There's no counter inside. There's no use of hands at all as far as what he's doing. He kind of just gets enveloped into the tackle way too often. And we've already seen in the run game, the strength isn't there. But I think Uchenna, one of the reasons that he's disappeared a little bit is teams know they don't have to fear the other side. They can give the double team over to Uchenna the last couple of weeks. So he's getting more attention, especially in the passing attack. I saw at times in this game, the Raiders go max protect just to do exactly that. Part of why it drove me crazy, there were such wide open holes because they go max protect. You got Mike Jackson 10 yards off Devontae Adams, and then he runs a little out route for a third down conversion. And it's such easy peasy kind of football to go out and attack from an offensive side of things because you're just giving it to them, to their best player at that.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair. I will say, for whatever it's worth, if we're in a position to take Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, regardless of what I want, it's hard for me to believe that we would pass on Will Anderson because he's the quote unquote generational pass rusher, generational talent. I'm not hearing that with Jalen. So we'll see how it goes. But to me, it could go either way.
I also think some of that's getting into echo chamberville a little bit with Will Anderson, in my opinion, because the more tape that I dive into on it, I don't know that I necessarily go generational. And maybe he's just keeping his foot off the pedal this year. But I see a guy that doesn't put a whole hell of a lot of effort snap in and snap out to what he's doing. I see a guy that's really limited with his pass rush and what he can do. You want to talk about Taylor being limited? That's the exact same kind of limitations you could apply to Will Anderson, but that's a generational. I got to take him number 2, number 3. Yeah, the quicknesses are great, and it does pop off the tape when it happens, but it doesn't pop off consistently. And he does play things overall pretty good. I'm not knocking him as a player, not saying he isn't a really fine player, but I think that you watch snap in and snap out what Jalen Carter does versus snap in and snap out what Will Anderson does. We can talk about generational labels. Who's being more productive on the football field? And for my money, with what I see with Jalen Carter at Georgia, I'm seeing the more productive guy right there. This year, at least. Maybe last year Anderson had his butt beat, but this year, to me, he's been the guy that's been really a centerpiece to me of that Georgia defense. Beyond production, just wreck and shop, which is what we need. We need a game shop wrecker in the middle, in my opinion.
Right. Well, either way, neither guy is walking through that door right now. We got to make do with what we got,
That's
unfortunately. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a narrative going forward, kind of like there was a month and a half ago, where people are saying, well, forget all the new stuff. Let's just go back to the 4-3 base cover 3 stuff.
Yeah.
And I got to say, again, I think these players are just not good. And I don't think the players are going to be able to have success in either scheme, really. Now, if you go to a 4-3, that might help Puna, might help Al Woods. Not that he's gonna be helped either way that much, because he's old and doesn't play that much. I feel like you're taking away something from Shelby Harris, because he's always been a 3-4 guy. So if you do the math, add and subtract, look at these guys, see what they can do, see what they've done before. Maybe it would be a little better to go back to the 4-3, but I'm not seeing it being enough to turn this defense around. So I think that the last thing I can say about it is it's just not going to get better this year by that much.
I agree. I don't think it would, but there is a part of me that does find myself a little bit in the camp with those folks at this point, because I wouldn't look to break this particular glass, Brendan, but you just got off this last season of making a lot of defensive changes on the other side of the ball for giving up a franchise record in yardage. You're on pace to give up more yards than that this year right now. And we've got 6 games remaining. I look at that and I go, okay, if I go to a 4-3 look, now I've got a Sam underneath. Daryl Taylor was reasonable as a Sam, taking on tight ends versus tackles. That might be helpful. You got a 5-man front now against the running game. That might be helpful. Does it expose some things in coverage or simplify some things for you to you in coverage at that point to open you up a little bit more there? Yes. But here's the problem that as I see it right now with this defense, and I think it's an overall arching problem with over the course of the year. We had the 4 games where they were good, Brendan, but they weren't being tested by the best of the best. We're talking New York's Giants. We're talking a Cardinal team that fluctuates up and down week in and week out, and a Charger team that was very much an ailing offensive unit coming into that particular football game.
Mm-hmm.
We can go blow by blow through this, but when you've had the even reasonable tests, it's kind of wilted. So if I can find something the defense can hang its hat on, because right now you can't stop the run. You doing better. Turnovers have at least been pretty consistent. I got to give them credit there. They've done very good in that respect throughout the season, but you can't stop the pass, can't stop the short pass. They're doing, I guess, a reasonable job of not giving up the deep stuff. But I think that I try to, as a defense, get back to, look, we give up 300 yards passing this last week, and we give up 230 yards to Jacobs on the ground. Find something to stop, take something away from the offense. And I think that going to the 4-3 defense, at least with the 5-man fronts, especially when you get base situations. I mean, Brendan, that's what they ran into today. They had I formation situations with the Raiders. How many times in this game did they go to that I formation? If you had the 4-3 under, those are done. If you could go to that sometimes, even on those kind of situations, that would hem that running game up. And again, remembering that this is the tape that's out there now on this Hawk team. The Buccaneers and this past week, the Raiders have given teams the blueprint along with what we've seen up until this point this season. Stay with the running game, keep hammering it on this Hawks team, and they will eventually you'll be able to break them. And so I do think it would help to maybe a little bit. I'm not saying I'm out like this is what they absolutely have to do, but I think that they should be in the ballpark of considering it, because right now you're not generating any pass rush, you're not stopping the run, you're giving up a lot of yards passing too. At least a couple turnovers, but that's not enough in itself to make this defense go. And you had a team last week with Raiders, Brendan. Raiders teams down two of their top 5 offensive players, and they still slaughtered you, just like Detroit did to you, just like New Orleans did to you. Like, these aren't teams coming in at their full strength,
Oh
folks.
yeah.
These aren't teams coming in like, oh, firepower there and firepower there and firepower back there and an all-pro offensive line. You're getting teams coming into this game with a little limp, little limp. Their hands not working right, and then they're still just boat racing the defense.
Yeah.
I do think it's kind of times we got desperate times, desperate measures. I think is a little bit of an application here.
Yeah, and we've been praising Pete Carroll a lot in this space lately, last month and a half, I'd say. I think that now that things have gone so hard the other way, we do need to. I do want to emphasize a little something here. This front seven is not made up of a bunch of guys that Pete Carroll just picked up. Like, oh, I have no money to spend. I'm just going to go get these guys at Home Depot and we'll go through a season with them. Like that's kind of my issue here. Early in the offseason, you decided, okay, Norton's out. We're going to bring in some Fangio guys. We're going to start moving towards a more 3-4 style defense, right? That was done before free agency. That was done before a lot of the things you did in the offseason, where you make that decision. You're going to change the defense. You're going to bring in Desai. You're going to promote Clint Hurt, and you're going to this more Vic Fangio defense. After that, you got Al Woods back on that contract. You extended Brian Monet, although there's no way he's going to see any of that money because he's going to be super cheap to cut this offseason. He's definitely on the chopping block. But you signed Quentin Jefferson. You traded for Shelby Harris. Now I understand that was a part of a much bigger trade, but still, and it's not just free agency too. It's draft picks. You drafted Daryl Taylor with a 2nd and 3rd round pick. You coveted him. You coveted Jordan Brooks. Honestly, you coveted Cody Barton. You spent a 3rd round pick on him. That's a top 100 pick.
Yeah.
So these are not the only guy in this front seven who you can say is just like a guy is Bruce Irvin, who is actually one of your better players. Like, yeah, that's a guy you just picked up because you needed a body. Okay, I get that. I totally understand that. But these are other guys are guys that you coveted, and you got them after you made the decision to switch up the defense. So the fact that they're not fitting, not a great reflection on his decision-making in this most recent offseason.
I mean, it isn't. I'll give you that. And let me get to where I think that this is the big question going forward for me with Carroll in regards to this will be what determines us getting to an elite place. And I think there's a lot of things he's gotten that's done really right. At the offensive side of the ball, we've got to give a tip of the cap to with Carroll and being willing to throw as much as he has, throwing on first down, running up tempo. These all go against his archetype of DNA and where he wants to be. And I want to give him credit there. He's kept the special teams top notch. Give him credit there. Kept the team motivated, kept a young team going. He's throwing 6 rookies out there and he's got them performing where they're performing. So I don't want to completely back, but I mean, yes, they did pick these guys out. They also changed to a defense, I think, at a point in time where there weren't a lot of viable options to go out there on the open market and rejigger this thing on the fly in one off season, especially when you had to dedicate as many resources as they did to the offensive line, running back position in the draft specifically. I mean, it was one defender that you were picking and Boye Mafe, who's a pure 3-4 outside linebacker. And then you signed Uchenna Nwosu. So you dealt with the 2 outside points as far as future goes, but you couldn't do as much to get on the inside. Where were you going to get it done from? Who was the free agent that they didn't sign? Not to mention they didn't have a lot of money because you had the dead money cap hits that you had to sustain with Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson. And we had one other guy, Carlos Dunlap, on that list on top of it. And so I think that my faith in this at this point with Carroll is coming into the thought process that he's going to address this in a big way this offseason, understanding there could only be so much they did last offseason. I do think that you're going to get probably at least 2, maybe 3 of those first 4 picks going to the defensive side of the ball, if not Carroll trying to talk Schneider into all 4 of them. My question with Carroll, though, and along your line of reasoning on this, the question for me with Carroll is this. You've had years of this problem coming up over and over every season, and it came up again this year. You went to the Fangio defense, Brendan. You changed to a 3-4 defense, but your coverages are remaining relatively the same as they always have been on the back end. You're not aggressive. You're not blitzing heavily. Every time you try to blitz, they look like they're lost doing it. They show their hand every time they try to do it. So then they fall back to going, well, we don't blitz good, so let's just run our front 4 at the offense, and somebody will get home. And year after year after year after year, you and I can walk through the timeline of the last 6 years on this. I mean, it is a 6-year problem. And that is that if you do not want to blitz and you do not want to be aggressive and you want to protect against the deep play, that's fine. That's okay. You can be successful doing that. But you need to then have the front 4 guys up front who can generate the pass rush all on their own. If you don't have the dogs to do that, the defense is done. It's shown that. It's seen its day. And that's the problem I have, is that every offseason you go into, when it comes to this, there's just not quite enough. We'll get up just good enough. And then you get in the season, you're like, man, we're down, like, we need 1 or 2 more pass rushers. This is really obviously like bad. And I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt this offseason because it's a rebuild year. And the results we've gotten, I think, are so much more awesome across the board versus this one part that remains a deficiency. But that's the part that he's got to me, open his eyes up to. Schneider's got to open his eyes up to and say, this defensive scheme, with the way Carroll wants to run it, he's not going to be blitz heavy. He's going to want to drop into soft zones. He's going to want to protect them against the big play. And if that's the case, we got to get the front four up there who can get it done. And you see, like, the Eagles doing this, right? With, like, the Robert Quinn trade and the Ndamukong Suh signing. You've seen these other teams do this over time, and getting these extra guys in there on the pass rush to help out, to really, especially those teams that don't want to blitz as much. And it's the part that's driven me crazy for years. Sorry to go on that tangent on that and that rant, but it's Brendan. That part has driven me crazy for years, because once again, we are facing it here for the most part this year. They've had, again, those little moments in those few games where it really jumped and popped, but outside of those, it's just not consistently there.
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, that Monet extension sticks in my craw because it feels like we haven't given him that much of a chance. Most of these games he plays like 13, 15 snaps. We've only given him significant snaps a couple times this year. And I'm like, okay, you're going to a 3-4. Monet is like 360 pounds or something. You give him that extension. I'm like, okay, he's going to be our nose tackle. He's going to be our zero tech. And then you don't really put him out there. It's like, okay, did he show something really bad in training camp? I mean, the contract extension is not going to matter in a couple months because he's going to get released almost certainly. But it does. I feel like there was some sort of, it feels like the person who gave the extension and the person who decides who plays are two different people there almost.
Very well could be. I didn't like the extension at the time either. I didn't know what he had done to earn it. It seemed all about something they had seen on the practice field that was so amazing that determined he needed to be given this thing. I mean, he wasn't a high draft pick. He's come out and had a couple games here or there where he's popped a little bit, but it's not like he's a game wrecker down there. And they didn't pay him game wrecker money, but to give him that money like you did, I would have rather have almost just, saved that money and rolled it over at this point in next year's cap. I mean, and they're going to get out, they'll get out from under that deal. I'm sure Jefferson will be moved on after this year. And a lot of it, I think, in the giving out those deals was the flexibility to get out of it after 1 year too. I think that probably impacted why those deals were signed, but it doesn't change the fact that they weren't great deals. And this team's going to have to, if they want to get to an elite status with the way Carroll runs defense, the way that he has it, it's built into his soul to run a defense. And as I said, soft coverages. I'm going to run double teams on a Devontae Adams, but I'm going to run my corner 10 yards off coverage every play with that double team. It's in you can't change it. You're not going to change that part. I'm accepting of it. I'm okay with it. I'm not bitching about it. I'm just saying, okay, Carroll, we accept that's how you want to roll it, but you got to get those guys up front. Well, Legion of Boom years, we can talk all we want about that secondary, but what did you have up front in that Super Bowl year? Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, Bruce Irvin, Chris Clemens, Clint McDonald, Brandon McBain. You didn't just go at it and go, let's just get a couple guys up in there. And, you hammered it. I mean, those Averill and Bennett signings that occurred, it wasn't clear how you were going to get these guys enough snaps when you signed it. I want that problem again. You need to have that problem in this defense, because if you don't, teams know how to slice and dice those soft zones, because they know if they've got the time to do it, they can run anything they want in the book at that point.
All right, let's open it up to some of these super chats here. Big Patty Daddy, thank you for the $1.99. Had to chop wood for 3 hours after Sunday. Frick.
Jeez, your hands
chopping wood. Isn't that the old Greg Schiano thing? Keep chopping wood. Wasn't that his catchphrase?
Yeah, I think he had didn't he have the hatchet in the locker room, I believe.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're wearing gloves, man, or you got some blisters like hell in your hands.
Yeah. I've chopped a little bit of wood before, but not for 3 hours.
I haven't done that either. Hopefully you're good for winter, Big Patty.
Yeah. Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. Nick Fleming loves mild hot sauce. Question, do we have a Daryl Taylor problem? Dude has been non-existent for the last few weeks. Love your guys' collab. Well, thank you, Kevin. And I don't even think of it as a Daryl Taylor problem anymore. I think the solution is he's not going to be here much longer, and we can't count on him for much of anything. I mean, honestly, we could get a news report right now. I could go look at my phone right now and see Seahawks have released Daryl Taylor, and I don't even think I would react. Like so disappointed.
Yeah, I am too, and I don't want to be kill the kid, but you tried him out there and gave him a chance in a position where he's on the left defensive side, despite the fact I think you'd ideally like to put him at Leo, or not Leo, but over to the blind side. You really use his speed and quickness, but he's most comfortable supposedly on that left-handed side. And he should be loving this change over to being an outside linebacker in this defense. It should be allowing him to soar. He's getting that extra. Now he's not lined up over defensive end heads up. He's getting that space to the outside again, which should accentuate his quickness and speed off the edge. And the fact that it's not, and that he's not getting in there at that point is it definitely does suck. I don't think he's going to get released, because the team can kind of sit on him and see, well, we've seen at least flashes of it with him, that if somehow or another he can get an off season where he just goes at it and it's contract year and you get the, whole Hercules thing going on an off season, maybe you can pull that through, but you can't count on him. And the problem that I have really right now, that's now the current of the moment, Brendan, that jumps out to me with him is that, okay, you couldn't handle rundown duties because you got swallowed up. When I had you as a 4-3 defensive end on early down duties last year, you got swallowed up. Okay, understand. I got to put you in a position to be successful. So what I'll do right now then is I'll put you in as a rotational rusher where you can just pin your ears back and be put once again in a position to be successful. So let's see here. Let's just check, Brendan. We've got, in this past week's game, you've got Mr. I'm just finding his little thing here. I want to bring this up. Daryl Taylor. So he had a 56 grade in this game. He was your 13th ranked defensive player, and his pass rush score was 50.
Right. To my knowledge, he played 18 snaps and did not record a tackle or a pressure or any kind of stat at all. The most impactful thing he did by far was run onto the field to block for Quandre Diggs as the 12th man, literally.
Exactly.
And somehow get away with it, which, I mean, I guess that's kind of a skill. That's hard to do.
It's either dumb as hell or a 1,000 IQ. It's one of the two on that one. And this is to me the one thing that's now, okay, this is really worrisome, because if I've got him on those rotational snaps, he should just be going like hell.
Yeah.
On all these snaps. But 50, that's not, I didn't give you the grade of what his normal grade was in the game. I just gave you the pass rush grade of 50. That's his bread and butter, and I'm a little thrown off by it. I'm not going to just chalk it up to, well, he's just a young guy, need more time. I think there is a little bit of, he is what he is. I know I had the 1 year at the leg, but this is still third season, technically speaking, in a pro environment. I don't see a lot of development going on here. I don't see a lot of,
he's gotten worse.
Yeah, it's regressed. You're right.
Yeah,
it's regressed.
last year he was a solid player. Last year he was fine. And then this year, at the start of the year, he can't play the run, but he's getting after the quarterback. I think in that Denver game, he had 4 QB pressures, and he got a couple of no calls on obvious holdings. And it's like, okay, at least he's getting to the quarterback and making plays in the backfield. He had that strip sack against the Falcons. He had a couple other games where he was getting pressure. Now he's not getting anything. Is he playing through some kind of an injury? Because it happened very quickly.
He did have the hip thing going on. And so maybe
Yeah.
we do come to find out that there's a hip thing that was working on him all this year, and he's been trying to fight through it. And at that point, that's again why I think that there's not a chance. I don't think he gets released, because I don't think the cost is going to be exorbitant this offseason. I think he gives you at least the body in there in the rotation, insurance for Boye Mafe if he doesn't go a little bit further in his development. So I do think he stays here, but I do think as well he's not earning more snaps. And Bruce Irvin in this game was one of your better rated defenders playing those snaps for Daryl Taylor. He's earning over Daryl Taylor. And I do want to commend Carroll and company. They're hurt as well in this, recognizing the fact that Irvin's being a better player right now and not marrying themselves to the fact that we got to just stay with Taylor and let him develop. And no, Irvin's been better all the way around. Run defense, pass rusher, every bit. So you let him run the snaps out there. Don't just do this. Well, the younger guys younger guy did a lot to not earn his way into the starting lineup. So go with what's working.
Yeah. I agree. It is weird seeing Bruce Irvin play 53 snaps in a game. That's not what you want, but it's the reality of the situation that we're in right now, that if you want to win games, you want him out there. Like how many rushing yards would Josh Jacobs have had if Daryl Taylor was out there for 53 snaps instead of the 17 he got?
Probably another
400.
50, probably another 50 at least.
Mm-hmm.
At least.
Right. Noah Milky, thank you for the 25 pounds. I think that is. I think it's pounds, which is actually more than dollars. So thank you very much, Noah. That's a big one.
You
You
know.
think you think with Carter being more 4-3 slash players regressing in 3-4, maybe going back to the old scheme with better talent. Top D's in the NFL are 4-3 slash our players are suited for it. Vic's D only works with him. Rob Stanton had a good video. Yeah, well, this is definitely something that's going to get discussed a lot coming up here. My counter would be we tried to sit in that old 4-3 for like 4 or 5 years, and it was never better than slightly above average. So I don't know if I want to go back to it and just say, okay, let's marry ourselves to being slightly above average. I'm trying to find a way to get back to something great. I understand right now we don't have great talent, but we've had some pretty talented defenses over the last 5 years, I feel like, and couldn't get a ton out of it. That was starting to tell me that the defense was getting figured out. So I don't know if I want to go back to it. But the Jalen Carter thing, I know he's more of a 4-3 guy, that's a compelling argument. I will say that.
Yeah, I think the 4-3-3-4 argument with, and this is a little bit I think why they were comfortable going this route too. It is a little bit ubiquitous in the respect of you normally ask 3-4 down linemen to 2-gap and hold at the line of scrimmage and take up blockers. This scheme asks for those guys to play a little bit more like you'd ask players in a 4-3 defense to play, especially the one gapping type defenses. It's a gap and a half, so it is an attacking style defense that would still be able to utilize his skill set in that respect of things. I don't think that would preclude him. Georgia does a lot of varying fronts to what they do. They bring a lot of blitzes. There's a lot of stuff they do that's not just simplified in a base 4-3 defense like you normally would see. I would also offer that Vic Fangio's scheme has not been adopted here. You brought in a 3-4 defense and you're running essentially what is for the most part the same kind of coverages on the back end. I don't really say that's taking Vic Fangio's scheme on. Vic Fangio's scheme is based out of you running a cover 2 shell look and then doing a myriad of things out of that. That's not what I'm seeing necessarily on a consistent base. Some of it you're seeing some, but you're not seeing also any of the blitz or pressure packages or anything to make the offenses uncomfortable. You're seeing the soft zone stuff. That's why I say on the back end, it's a lot still really of the same old stuff Carroll would run on the back end coverage wise, because that's what he wants to do. So until you adopt Fangio's scheme, you don't really know if it works or not. And if you don't have the personnel up front to do it, you don't really know if it works or not. I agree with Brendan on this one. I do believe that you've seen with that 4-3 under defense, that where it can get in this modern NFL age. Those teams out there that run 4-3 defenses do so also with a lot of blitz heavy looks more often than not. Tampa Bay will blitz the hell out of you out of their 4-man front. They don't just sit with 4. If we run the 4-3, we're going to run with a 4-man front and not be exotic at all. That's why it didn't work before, was because it was so predictable. An offense could come up to the front and see what you were doing and then be able to work off of that. The 3-4 is the unpredictableness. That's why you made that change. You get right back into that same reservoir once again if you backtrack in that direction of things. The only fix there is if you have elite talent, Brendan. They can go get 4 more Hall of Famers again, stack a defense up like that once again, then yeah, sure, you could go back to doing something like that. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think that's kind of a one-off kind of thing there. So I think go with the other betterhood, which is look progressively forward towards something that's going to actually move the needle in a potential better direction.
Yeah, and I do think it's fair to point out that our best defensive player has played 15 snaps this year. And I think we were building a lot of this around him.
Mm-hmm.
And
Agreed.
Unfortunately, we just will never know if he would have made things better, but he certainly wouldn't have made things worse, especially when Josh Jones takes his place half the time.
It's so true, man. That guy does not like to tackle. I maintain that I think that why we've seen a lot of the zone coverages, and again, this is me making a guess, but I do maintain why we've gone to the soft zone coverages is not because Carroll can't just relinquish it all, but because it was all built around, to your point, Adams doing his thing down there around the line of scrimmage. And the fact that went out the door, they just didn't feel like they had anybody else with a commensurate skill set to be able to handle those duties. And so they said, okay, well, we don't have that. So what's plan B then? Well, let's go back into some of the same stuff we've done coverage wise in the past, because we know it and our players know it and we can get by with it. But instead of getting by, they're getting hammered.
Yeah, and I just feel like Jamal would have been used as a blitzer almost as much as he was used in 2020 as a blitzer. And I think you would have seen a lot more quarterback pressure that way. I think the third down thing would be a lot better because you would be blitzing him a lot on third down. And I think to a certain extent, even now coming up on week 13, you're still kind of scrambling to figure out, oh crap, we lost our best player. Now what do we do? And you found something that worked for a little while there, but there's just no replacing that very unique talent that Jamal Adams is. There's no other player in NFL history really like him, I think. Is that fair to say?
Oh, it is. Yeah, you don't get a guy. I mean, there's been not. Yeah, I mean, I would say like that Cardinals free safety, the strong safety they had for years. He was a bigger guy than him, but he played very similar.
Adrian Wilson?
Adrian Wilson. He had some of that to his game as well. But, I mean, he was on a Hall of Fame trajectory when he arrived here, Brendan, for a reason, because he was being that kind of unique player with New York and the kind of guy you don't see usually at the safety position with the kind of skills he brings to bear, including the tackling, including the ability to be such a unique, effective blitzer. I do think that they would go back to that and utilize way more of that stuff if he was here. It would look more Fangio-like, I think, if Adams was here. We'll see what they do with him on that in the future. If they look to get a guy that has more of a close skill set to him in the draft, maybe, so that it doesn't have to be a complete toss it all out if something does happen to him. I do maintain it would have been nice to have some kind of insurance there for him that they could have built in on this pass going back to plan B, which is just do old coverage stuff. It's disappointing that we're going to have to kind of, punt on that this year, see how that could work, because it makes it harder to make the assessment about this defense. That your very question about the donation there, how do you make the assessment if you're like, well, but they're going to institute this next year when they got the guys on the line and the safety. We still won't know if it'll work at that point, unfortunately. It's going to be kind of a shot in the dark still.
Yeah, and not that this means anything yet, but I will say this. My current prediction, what I believe will happen is that we will end up with the number 2 pick and that CJ Stroud is going number 1 to Houston, which means you will have that choice. Do you want to go Will Anderson, put him at edge in a 3-4? I think that's probably where he would be best, and try to move forward with this style of defense? Or do you want to go Jalen Carter and maybe start doing more of the old stuff just with a supreme talent in the middle who can actually wreck shop? I do think that is going to be an interesting decision tree for this regime.
It's something, you and I will be turning over in every direction, and we're just starting to get into it, and we haven't even gotten, I haven't even got my assessments done on either player. It's just been really the initial view and looking at a couple of games with both of them. So there's a lot more to break down. It's going to be a fluid situation here, but that will be, you're right, the debate. Hell, even if you're 3, there will be the Levis part of the debate in there. I'm still going to maintain this is my hot take on this, Brendan. It's something that in looking at this and hearing about it from the NFL circles on this, NFL people like him a lot more than fans do in their view of him, especially Seahawks fans. I have a lot of people out on Levis. A lot of people go, I don't like Levis. Too many mistakes, plays position too wild. He's going to go in the top 5, and he very well may be your Seattle Seahawks pick. So start finding some love for him, because NFL circles like him a lot more than NFL fans, and they give the benefit of the doubt I've talked about to him that I think some fans aren't.
Yeah. I do think that when you're evaluating college players, sometimes people put a little too much in what they see in a game when there's so much else to look at. Like, I had a couple comments after the Ohio State Michigan game last week that basically said, why would anybody want CJ Stroud now? Did you see what happened when he got pressured? It's like, who cares? Have you seen his accuracy? Have you seen the way he's able to layer his throws?
Yeah.
He could have a million games like the game he just had against Michigan. He would still have that golden arm. So,
who
cares?
I don't know how you don't look at that game and go, well, much like our game this last Sunday, I looked at the Michigan-Ohio State game that I did watch, and I said that Ohio State got their butts whooped at the line of scrimmage. And it's on both sides of the ball, plain and simple. And that has nothing to do with CJ Stroud. That has to do with the fact that Michigan and Harbaugh's will is in on that defense, and they put it on the Ohio State. And there were some throws in that game that I still thought Stroud, he had one throw, Brendan, where he's moving to his left, but he's still at the far hash away from the sideline. So it's one of those throws where it's like going 35 yards in the air because of those long ass hashes in college football. And he puts it with power right on the sideline, right on Marvin Harrison. And there was a couple of those throws in the game where, to your point on that, the golden arm thing, it absolutely stands out. And yeah, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. He's going to be the guy who'll be taken when it's all said and done. I don't buy this, that somebody's going to jump on Bryce Young with his size issues. And I know that there's some people that are on that boat. I'm not one of them. I think Young does get taken in the first round, but I don't think that he gets taken in the top 5.
Yeah, I think he's going to be top 15.
Mhm.
I
I
will
go to that.
stand by that, but I'm not sure about top 10. It depends on who's picking there, honestly. Like, I think it makes a lot of sense for him to go to Detroit.
I could see that.
So wherever Detroit's picking. And Detroit's hot right now. They might end up picking in like the middle teens.
They might. Yeah. I mean, it's very much true. And then what is the other question though is then what does Detroit want to do with that first pick they have? Because they have the Rams pick too. So that's the other part to consider with it. And that could drive some of this is that he gets overpicked picked higher because there is the need thing. But I think it does go Stroud, Levis, Young is the order when we get to draft day. That's my bold take. I could be wrong on this, but that's the feeling I'm getting out there.
Yeah, and the point Stroud to extend it over to Levis. Yes, Levis has had bad games this year for sure, but what do you care more about? You've seen him play some of those bad games this year, or you care more about the fact that he has that incredibly good arm, incredibly strong arm ability to just fit the ball into these tiny windows and plus mobility. Not quite Josh Allen, but in that realm. Are you going to get caught up in this one game that he played where he didn't play that well when he's got a terrible offensive line and terrible receivers? Or are you going to focus more on the fact that what he can actually do? And before you answer that question, go look up Josh Allen's stats at Wyoming and look at what he's doing right now.
Yeah. I think he's going to be a 4-4. I think he's going to be a 4-5-5 guy when he does his 40 on top of that arm, by the way. And he shows that he's got a good ability, not just mobile, but he's a willing runner in the open field. And so that's also a part that NFL teams are going to jump out at. They're going to go, oh, wait, he's not a 4.72. He's not a 4. Oh, he's 4.5. He's like close to Russell Wilson speed coming out with that arm and the size he's got. Yeah, he's going to be taken. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised because so many people are like, there's no way that because people are projecting him. It isn't about where he is, it's about where he projects to. And with that guy, you've got a lot on like, we can clean the problems in his game up. He's got things I can't teach.
Right. William Leonard, thank you for the $5 super chat. What was up with the refs scrutinizing DK's last catch? Did they do it because it was only a crucial, momentous event that could dictate the outcome? Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when there used to be, I think it was a 90-second timer on challenges. Refs, after 90 seconds, the feed would just cut. And like, okay, whatever you've seen, you got to make the call. And I don't know when they removed it, but clearly they have, because that was the longest video review I can ever remember in any NFL game.
I'm glad you felt the same way, because that's what I said during the live broadcast is I've never seen one take this long. And I wish they would institute that very same thing you talked about. Not only would it help for the game flow, but the bottom line on this goes like this. It only gets changed if it's like, a unanimous jury having to decide on a murder trial. That's the same applicable standard that should be applied in those moments. The call on the field is only changed if I go to 12 people in a jury, essentially as far as an equivalent, and say, did you see this ball move out? And if all of them, if it takes all of them at that point to say, no, it's a no catch, to overturn it. If it's on the line, you stay with the call on the field. And he had his hands under the ball. They're making the call on when it's coming back over the top of his belly. My point is it can move if he controls it. That's how the rules say that, as if it can move as long as the player is controlling the ball. But the sheer fact, Brendan, it's irrelevant. The fact it took him that long shows that it wasn't conclusive. It's indicative of itself that you take 20 minutes to look at the plays 50 times, not conclusive, call in the field. That's the way it's supposed to go. It's I hate talking about the refs, but frankly, they can blow me. It's like another game where it's like calls that occur at a very important part of the game, where it's like, oh, well, we blew our whistle on the Jacobs fumble. Whoops. Oh, we'll take 20 minutes to look at this review. Oh, well, we finally got the angle. We finally got the right one there at minute 19. That was the clear one right there.
Yeah, I mean, I can see why the DK plays incomplete. I can. But coming on the heels of the call on the Jacobs fumble where they blew him dead like the moment he stopped moving, and I want to be clear about that play. That was a mistake. That was not really a bad call. That was a mistake. They can't reverse that. Like that was not an instance where they looked at it and say, we don't think it's a fumble. No, they made a mistake and we're not legally allowed to go back and look to determine whether or not it was a fumble. That's not a bad call. But on the heels of that, having that review, it just felt like somebody had made a call.
I
somebody had made a
agree.
call that like, hey,
Yeah.
we got this new team in Vegas. They're losing. They suck. We need some excitement, man. We need some excitement back in Vegas, or else these Vegas people are going to lose interest in the team. They've got a million other things to do. And I was like, okay.
I'm just, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case on it. The New York made the call and they were like, well, didn't take it. But again, yeah, I could see theoretically, but again, to take the long time that they took, to me, again, is indicative is not conclusive. It's on the line. And if it's on the line, you go to the call in the field. You trust your refs. Or we just go to robo refs. I mean, that's where it needs to go almost a little bit with that. But it is what it is. I don't want to complain about it too much, but to me, it was a catch. I do believe, as I understand the rules, you can have the ball moving as long as it's not flopping along and you're controlling the ball through the process of the catch. It can have some movement. It doesn't have to be stone still sitting in your little bread basket there. You can have it kind of go around a little bit. But yeah.
David Pugh, thank you for the $9.99. I'm sure y'all saw the reveal of the throwback jerseys coming in
Oh yeah.
2023.
Oh
What are
yeah.
the odds they make it our standard jerseys, like how the Bucks did in 2020? Make them full time. I don't know if I would want them all the time.
I think the kids are going to see these jerseys and get hyped on them, man. I do think that. So I don't know if you'll get full time with them either. I don't know why you can't bounce around and have a couple games a year you use them, and I think that you could use a couple of different jersey styles, I would believe. But I'm just hyped they're coming back no matter the case, David, how much they use them. I think especially as I've maintained those younger fans that weren't around like I was around in the 80s to get to see those uniforms on these, you're going to love them. They're tight looking. They're very Pacific Northwest looking. I feel like they got that flavor to them with the gray. It's going to be cool. I'm glad that they finally did it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's the year after we let Wagner go because he was one of the people who really wanted it.
He was. Well, maybe he comes back next year, man. maybe
I don't think there's any way out of that contract.
Oh, there
For a
isn't?
year.
Oh, wow.
I think he's stuck there for another year after this one, and then maybe we can have that conversation. I mean, I'm sure he's going to do a one-day contract at some point and retire a Seahawk, but would he come back and play?
Probably not. You're right. The way they probably had to structure that contract to make sense that it's a two-year deal that they got to take care
Right.
of. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't mind the idea though of having an ultra special jersey that you whip out for special moments. So I don't know if I feel the need to make this the full-time jersey. Just do it sometimes.
Well, let's just see how it looks on the field, man. That's all I'm saying, Brendan. Give it a chance. If maybe it intoxicates when you see on the field, you're like, wow, they look faster, sleeker, bigger. Like I think we're gonna have to go with these jerseys, more intimidating. So give it a chance, man. Give it a chance.
Kevin Mullen, thank you for the $4.99. Nick Fleming wipes from back to front. Okay. Stats. Defense had 12 QB hurries, which is way more than I thought they had watching that game.
Yeah.
2 QB hits, which I believe, and 1 sack. Yeah, Puna. Wosu had 1 hurry, 1 hit out of 29 possible pass plays. Wow. Yeah, I'm thinking that 12 QB pressure thing is probably from Amazon, and they have some bizarre criteria where if there's ever open field between a defender and the quarterback at any time when the quarterback has the ball, like there's nobody in between the pass rusher and the quarterback, it's a pressure, which I have to admit I don't buy because you could be 12 yards away from the quarterback potentially.
Yeah.
That's not pressure.
Well,
Or if it is,
how about the naked boots where you
Yeah.
leave the defender unblocked because you're trying to get him to buy in on the run play, and now he's coming at the quarterback off the run look, but the quarterback has 5 yards to throw the ball in the little out route. I agree.
Yeah. So I don't buy the way Amazon does QB pressures. I like PFR. PFR does it. I know PFF does it as well. They're pretty good. Amazon is trying it a different way, and I just have to ask: are you actually affecting the play? And it's hard for me to believe that some of these QB hurries are actually affecting the play the way that we're talking about. So either way, not particularly good, and I guess it's slightly better than what we had against Tampa, right?
Yeah, and I think in regards to the Nwosu part of that, he came out of this game actually graded fairly well by PFF, and that did match to what I was seeing as well. Not well, just 63. He was fine. He wasn't a huge problem necessarily on the day.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's getting in. If you folks watch this on the telecast this next week, I think he's getting a lot of attention. And when you get consistently doubled, when I'm coming off as a pass rusher and I'm getting chipped by a running back or a tight end, or just getting a straight double team by those guys, somebody else has got to go out there and eat on that defensive line at that point. The second you get that guy doubled, that's the way that's got to work. Part of why I say, Brendan, you got to build this thing up to a strength of that defense, that defensive line, because you can't just have one guy you're hoping carry the carry, as we've done so many times through the years. The Jadeveon Clowney year, for instance, Frank Clark year, that was here. Like, you just kind of, one is, it's Frank or it's Jaron Reed. Frank or Jaron Reed. Remember, that was that year that was that way. So it's you got to get out of that, because the teams can then neutralize your best pass rusher if you do have an impactful guy, as teams are starting to do with Nwosu over the last couple of weeks. I don't think he's just getting blocked up so great, or he's suddenly disappearing. I think he's getting attention because he was balling out through the first part of this year.
Yeah, you gotta have at least one other guy who can get it done in those situations. If one guy's taking the double team, like you're saying, which I agree, it just doesn't make sense, right? This guy's been killing it for 8-9 games, and then suddenly he disappears. Did he forget how to play football, or did the circumstances change? The circumstances probably changed.
Well, and think about it. If you're scouting the Seahawks and you're looking at them defensively through the first few weeks, and you've got those couple of games where there's some pass rushers, but you look through the majority of the games, you go, okay, Uchenna is really kind of a problem. He's generating a lot of pressures, a lot of hurries here. Well, okay, that's an issue. What is the rest of the line doing? Kind of bumpkus. A couple of sacks from here, a couple of sacks from there, but everybody's kind of just on a play-by-play basis. There's not a lot of consistency there. Well, if you're doing any kind of scouting on that point, you're going to go, why don't we just double him then? Swing it a little bit towards that, and then we know our other guys can one-on-one hold up. And that's what's happening, is guys are one-on-one being able to handle our defensive line right now. And so it makes sense that teams are also doing this from a tactical standpoint. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And like I said at the top of the show, I don't think there's a fix on this current roster. I don't know if it's going to get better this year.
Agreed. I think it's just, there's some enigmas on this team that aren't going to be solved right now. It's just unfortunate.
Silver lining on the defense, a couple of them. Quandre Diggs, not that he had an amazing game. I would say there were definitely some plays where I think he had a missed tackle. He gave up the touchdown to Abdullah, arguably the touchdown to the tight end that tied the game at the end of the fourth quarter. I think he was supposed to follow, and
that's on Brooks.
That's on Brooks. Okay. I was looking at that play a few times trying to figure out what was supposed to be going on there.
You can see Brooks, if you look at the play, sorry to interrupt you, but if you watch the play, Brooks gets his feet tangled under him as the tight end gets to the stem of the route, and then he's just playing catch up on the rest of the route. So that's why it does look that way to you, why there's that so much separation there. But that was just feet got tangled. Just it's not like a full on he falls, but just a little bit of a where they kind of go together a little bit.
All right, yeah, I can dig that. And apparently the entire world knows about Tariq Woolen now, because Devontae Adams treated the left side of the field like there was plutonium buried 3 feet underneath the turf, and he needed to stay away from it.
Word is out on the scene. You don't go out left way. There is an island, folks, out in the Pacific, but you can visit it. Yeah. So it's there, but it's like the Lost Island. You ain't getting on it. That's the way it works with Woolen Island.
Yeah. Did you see Derek Carr's pass chart?
I did. It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was 24 in the middle and to the right. He had 5 passes to the left. 4 of them were right at the line of scrimmage. One of them was the deep one to Hollins, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The one, it was 17, 18 yards down the field. But yeah, they're just not throwing Woolen's way anymore. And I mean, he can get better too, is the thing. I don't think he's anywhere near his peak as a player. I don't think he's peaked at all.
It's also, Brendan, why I say, in considering all the options we're going to consider here, and we're going to go through this into the future, but why a guy like Ringo's name to me in this draft comes up as a guy, or not Ringo, a guy, and even in the high pick in the first round, somebody that you can match up on the other side, so teams can't do this. Because we saw this with Richard Sherman, didn't we? There's a lot of those passing charts you probably would have saw in Sherman's time here in Seattle, of not one pass to his side, everything thrown over to the left, where Sherman was on the right, and this is a little bit flipped. And this is especially going to be true, Brendan, because the fact Woolen plays on that left side, or whatever you want to call it, defensive right side, offensive left. And why that's important, Brendan, is because offenses have a tendency to naturally throw more to the right than the left. Quarterbacks tend to be more accurate throwing to the right and to the left. So with Sherman, it was a great advantage to have him to the right side because you were then forcing quarterbacks literally to play left-handed a little bit. Right now, you're forcing quarterbacks to play to their strong side. So having potentially maybe a matchup cornerback over there who can, if not match the somewhat close to talent of what he has, a guy that's impactful as well, could also help considerably on this defense going forward. And maybe worth considering if you could get a couple of those guys on rookie deals through the first couple of years and then build up around that. I know it'd be not necessarily the most popular picks, but I could understand going that from a philosophy standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, are we already kind of thinking that the guy can't be Trey Brown or Kobe Bryant or even, I mean, Michael played okay in this game. I thought he certainly wasn't great. We don't expect greatness from him, but I wouldn't necessarily dismiss Kobe or Trey Brown being that guy who can be the really good number 2 corner.
It's possible. Both of those guys are 4th round guys, and I'm talking about a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
You know, that's a difference of talent substantially. So,
Eh.
Those guys could be good corners in this league. Those guys could be upper level corners in this league. You have a potential of drafting a star corner opposite Tariq. And that's what I'm maintaining is if you have a guy that's just kind of a little bit above average, that's not going to dissuade quarterbacks from, not avoiding Wool, and they'll still go after that guy. And so it's a little bit, I could be wrong on this and that's not a way to maximize this. Maybe it's just get a better pass rush and put it all into that. And then you'll have quarterbacks at times throw his way and they'll be rushed and whatnot. But I just remember those years with Sherman and quarterbacks, especially when Shaquille Griffin got here at times, we're not going to go over there. The whole playoff game at the Green Bay Packer game, I'm not going to go over there. The very next year when, Sherman in the opening game of the year against Packers, Roger didn't test him once over there. And so I don't want to let offenses have that ability to do that into the future if we don't have a good enough guy on that side who is able to be picked on a little bit.
Yeah, some people were unhappy that we didn't have Woolen follow Adams around in this game. I don't want to put more on his plate. He's already doing so much more than I was expecting. I'm not trying to make him less effective by asking him to play like Deion Sanders or something. I'm not. We don't need to.
It's kind of a silly sentiment. I know where people are coming from with it, but you got to peel back the layers as to why teams have players travel. Why would I have a guy travel with the guy? Well, if I'm having a guy travel with a guy, first off, understand that everybody else now has to be built around understanding what that guy's doing and their responsibility pre-snap. So you get people outside their defense the moment you do that. The other part in time where you normally have that is you have that on 3-4 base teams that are blitz heavy and play a lot of man coverage. We play zone. So it doesn't really fit to have him travel as a zone defender and get the benefits of that traveling player at that point. Not to mention it's better to dictate an offense usually going into a direction than another. That far outweighs the benefits of having him travel, especially with a guy like Davante Adams, because all they're going to do then at that point is line him up in the slot. Do you want Tariq Woolen in the slot, Brendan? You think he's going to play as good in the slot as he does on the outside? I don't. Sherman didn't when teams did that to him. And so I get where they're coming from with it, but we don't run the defensive stylings that lend itself well to cornerbacks traveling. And if Richard Sherman didn't travel, Tariq Woolen certainly isn't going to travel either.
Right. I agree with that. And to my knowledge, Sherman only traveled with players a handful of times. Like I remember he did it with AB. There was that one game against the Steelers, the shootout, where we had him follow AB. But for the most part, even Sherman at his peak, who was probably the best safe corner of his generation, didn't follow that much. So I'm not. I don't know. I think Woolen's obviously playing phenomenally, but I'm not looking to do things that might make him play a little worse. Like let's just be happy we have what we have, and what we have is a corner who is practically taking away the entire left side of the field.
Absolutely. You got a superstar on the making over there. It's not something you want to, don't break something if it's working and going very well. Find fixes in other directions if that side of the field's bad. If we don't like Mike Jackson, then look to Trey Brown, but I wouldn't look to try to have him go outside of his role that he's been so tremendously successful in.
The Snail, thank you for the $5. The NFL should embrace their inner duck. Different jerseys every week required. That'd be a lot of money.
It'd be a lot of money. I think it would get old doing too many. I don't like the too many. Like the NBA is doing this at times. I think it can be just overload. But I think certainly to be able to use your throwbacks whenever you want, absolutely. Why shouldn't you be able to? I don't like well, there's only 2 jerseys you can use to this, and if you use it to that, you can only use this. I mean, that's kind of dumb. But having a set couple of jerseys that you're familiar with instead of, I don't want some wild every other week. It's, and this week we get the pink Seahawk jersey, and this week we get no, I'm good with staying with the bases, but definitely the retros.
Yeah. I how long before we start getting the jerseys with like the big like in MLS where it's like, Microsoft presents the Seattle Sounders. How long before we getting like ads for Facebook and Chase Bank on NFL jerseys?
They'll probably get to the point, Brendan, with the way this technology is going, that it'll be like a running like GIF on the jersey, not just
Mhm.
the image, but it'll be like something that plays that looks like it's actually on them playing, but it'll just be a graphics that they're inserting over the top,
Mhm.
with where it's going. That's probably going to be what next. How long? Not long, probably. NFL doesn't leave money on the table.
I mean, the NBA has already done it. I've been seeing NBA jerseys that are advertising like Tinder and stuff, so
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
getting there.
It's getting there, man. It is. And it's a lot of money they can charge to do that, right? I mean, you could charge
Mhm.
a bundle of cash.
Oh yeah. Big time Willie, thank you for the 4.99. Raiders fan, good game. No, it wasn't. Honest opinion about Geno and thoughts on making the playoffs. All right, so this is a good opportunity to turn the page to our offense
Mm.
because the offense, 34 points, a couple of turnovers, not what we like to see necessarily, but there's been a little bit of chatter, I think, from Seahawks fans about the offense and specifically about Geno, where he didn't win the game at the end of the fourth quarter. He didn't win the game in overtime. So we need to get rid of Geno now. And I think that's a valid criticism to say he had the ball in his hands a couple times at the end and couldn't go win. But I think there's definitely been an overreaction to what happened at the end of that game. So let's talk about it. How do you see it?
I don't like the narrative, or I don't like I'm not a big fan of the opinion out there that Geno hasn't proven himself until he can have comeback win after comeback win and show us that he could do it. I don't fall in that camp. It's a little bit of what we heard after the Falcon game. Well, showed his colors in that game, showed you what he was. But you and I have broken down how with that the end of that game went, right? Sack, penalty to second and long, and it was
Well,
very.
Well, that game was over. We had first and goal at the 8, and then Damian Lewis commits holding and blows everything up. To me, I look at that and I go, Geno did pretty much his job.
Right. These people that are saying this about Geno today, they look at that game and say this is exactly representatory of that game too, as what we've seen so far this year. I'll bring something up like, Brendan, well, what about when he threw the pick six at the end of the third quarter against the Cardinals, and we're down by points at that point going into kind of just the fourth, and then he comes back with 3 straight touchdown drives. It's like, well, that doesn't count. Okay. What at the end of this game, let's go through the sequence of plays. Really, he's got the DK throw that he makes, which is on the button. DK makes the catch, overturned. Is that a bad pass by Geno there? Is that him doing something wrong? You got the sack that occurred. They've said there was supposed to be a chip block on the play. Geno doesn't chip block. Travis Homer's supposed to chip block. Travis Homer ran out into a route instead of chip blocking. So that left
Um,
Max.
I think it was Noah Fant who was supposed to chip block on that
Okay.
play,
I'm thinking of a
and
different.
Fant, like I've seen the clip a couple times now. It is the saddest chip block I've ever seen in my life, and I like Noah Fant a lot, but
Yeah. He didn't do
you
it.
should watch that. You should definitely check that out. He basically pushes Crosby into Geno and then just takes off on his route. And it's like, thanks, dude. Now even Abraham Lucas can't get out to him because you basically put jets on his feet and pushed him past the pocket, past Lucas.
You touch on the bottom line point of that, which is that Geno didn't have any time in that pocket that moment to make that throw. And if I'm not mistaken, that's a third and long, second and long, third and long, whatever, where he's got to wait for those routes to develop down the football field. There's times where I see people make criticism of holding the ball on these 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 11s, where I got to let those routes get down the football field. I can't throw those after 2 seconds like I can on the little short routes to the out routes to Tyler Lockett for 7 or 8 yards. They got to get up the field for me to have the time to do that. That means I got to hold the ball for a beat longer. But you look through that last sequence of that game, there's things outside of his control that wasn't him playing poorly in those moments that caused that thing to go askew. I don't need him to go and have 3 fourth quarter comeback drives to know that he's a guy that can get us to a Super Bowl if we build the rest of this roster out right. There's a lot of other quarterbacks who've gotten to Super Bowls, a lot less talented, a lot less productive than Geno Smith is being this year and what he is showing. To me, this was another indicative good game, maybe not a great game, but another good game that he has stacked minimum over every game this football season, even the 49er game, which I thought he played good in. He just fit to the game plan, which was conservative, which was trying to protect your rookie tackles, and which frankly got a little schizophrenic with some of the play calling, especially when they got down by the red zone in that particular game. But I think that people are a little preloaded with Geno, Brendan, in my opinion. As I said, I think the same people would look at that Falcon game and say, well, he effed that one up. Even though you and I both know and look in that game, you mentioned the penalty, then there's the penalty and then there's the sack, right? Remember Austin Blythe completely whiffed on a block there? When I say whiffed, didn't get even touch the guy from the defensive tackle position, which we saw out of Austin Blythe today as well. Didn't we see that out of him with Billings up front? Wasn't Billings
that was
wrecking shop?
I think that was the worst game that Blythe's had so far this year.
Right, it was. And so these are the things that impact that. A fourth quarter comeback does not just happen because the quarterback's back there gunslinging away. It happens because the personnel across the board is executing. And when multiple guys aren't executing, when there are guys drawing penalties, that doesn't then go back to the quarterback if it's not on him that's causing those penalties. You got to go and point the blame in the right place. And coming out of this game, Brendan, when you scored 34 points, I keep going back to the people that I'm trying to truly understand it. I might sound like I'm throwing shade at the people that are anti-Geno. I am kind of trying to understand it, but it does get to me hard to wrap my head around where you go, okay, he put 34 points up on the board today. What is the expectation level here? He's got to put 40 up, 45. That's where we've drawn ourselves with Geno, that he's got to get to that level of things. I mean, if he puts 34 up, isn't that good enough? I mean, shouldn't we be, and again, maybe I'm just being blind on this and not seeing what they're seeing with it, but I don't see him getting tight thing, Brendan. If he gets tight, that Cardinal game doesn't happen. If he gets tight right after he has that fumble down on their side of the field, he doesn't then bring him right back with a Tyler Lockett throw down the sideline for a touchdown in that game. The resiliency has been there. That's what the people are intimating about. There's no resiliency, or when the tough get going, Geno shrinks. But he's showing you the signs of this resiliency throughout the year. He's showing you the signs he's got this in him, but he's got to have the other guys on this offense hold up to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I often say, and I stand by, that a huge part of being a quarterback is going to win the game or save the game or tie the game or whatever at the end of these fourth quarters, because most games in the NFL are close and you're going to have to win a lot of games that way. My thing is, him hitting Travis Homer for that touchdown to give us the touchdown lead with 5 minutes left. I think it was Homer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that needs to be the game-winning drive. The defense needs to step up and make a play after the Travis Homer touchdown, and that needs to be Geno's game-winning drive. What's wrong with that? And I know the defense kind of did make a play, and then the refs blew the play dead and blah, 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 but you still let the Raiders march down the field.
Mm-hmm.
You still gave up the touchdown. So that's kind of my thing about it. And again, I'm going to reiterate, this is a quarterback who's making at most $7 million this year. Okay. I mean, if you're going to have a quarterback who you're going to give $7 million, I don't think it's fair to say he needs to be like Aaron Rodgers, $50 million, where he carries you every single game. No, you need to do a little bit of work to lift him up at sometimes. And the defense did not in this game.
Yeah. Defense could have given up 28 points in this game and you still probably win this comfortably. That's where the blame goes. And Geno's doing enough. He's generating enough points over the course of the game. He's being consistent enough with the drives. He's making enough big time throws within that to where he is absolutely a part of why we're winning and doing well and holding up in these games. He's not holding us back. It's not like if we had Russ in at quarterback instead of Geno this year right now, we'd be 9-10-1, 10-2 or something, I'd say. No, we wouldn't. He's really playing well. And I do hope he gets the contract extension this year. I am going to be willing to pay him some money. I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I think that he has shown you with 2 rookie tackles on the outside, with a rookie running back, with an interior and an offensive line that is kind of in shambly points at times outside of Damian Lewis occasionally playing fairly strong. So he's kind of got through that. He's got guys on the outside, playmakers, tight ends. Yes, but he's been able to excel, put up the best season of his career this year. I think you give him even a better team next year. I think the performance even goes even further. And I think at that point, he'll finally, maybe silence some of these doubters that are kind of holding on. But I don't get, Every game this year he's played good, Brendan. Every single one. So big time, Willie. Thank you. I like the guy a lot. I'm perfectly happy letting him ride into the future. I don't need the game-winning drives because, again, I look at it through the lens of game-winning drives don't just happen because the quarterback's back there doing everything brilliantly. Oh, he's running the up-tempo and calling the right plays and then throwing to the right guy and then knowing when to scramble and knowing not when to scramble. Well, how's the pass protection? Are the receivers getting open in their routes in those 2-minute situations? Doesn't that impact as well? Is the coach calling timeouts at the right points or is he doing something to muck that part up? Those things also factor into those 2-minute situations, and they get tossed out a little bit when it's all about what did he do? What did he do? What was his performance? And that's where I don't quite land in that place as much. I think it's important you don't have a guy shrink, but has Geno showed you that he shrinks in those big moments this year? I don't think he has. I think he's shown the opposite.
If anything, he's shown that he's phenomenal at closing out games. Like,
Exactly.
look at the job he did against, like, the Lions closing that game. We punt one time in that game, we lose.
Bingo.
Like,
Chargers.
Chargers, good example. I think the Cardinals was a good example because after the pick six, he reeled off 3 straight touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And oh, by the way, he threw an interception in this Raiders game that, as near as I can tell, wasn't on him. As near as I can tell, Lockett and Metcalf ran into each other or something like that. Like that's something that's not really on his head in my view. So that's 7 points minimum as a swing right there. So I don't know. I just think people need to cool off a little bit on this Geno stuff.
And he's doing things from a leadership standpoint on top of this, like not just the production level, but you talk about that play. Coach Carroll in his press conference talked about how, yes, it was the 2 receivers colliding. It was a wonky thing that happened. It was just a weird thing, but it wasn't on Geno. And then the reporter said, well, does it speak something about Geno that he still took responsibility for it, even though you're saying it wasn't his issue? And he said, yeah, he's shown you that this whole way. He's shown you this leadership this whole way. And that's also a part of this. Well, I mean, what does that, that's a big factor to playing the quarterback position too. We're seeing that across this league. And he's bringing that to you every week. He's bringing that calming force. He's bringing that guidance. He's bringing that guy that's, even in those moments, they're taking responsibility. What a breath of fresh air from my standpoint to watch my starting quarterback taking responsibility. He didn't say, it was in it. Yeah, the interception's on me, but, Tyler Lockett and DK collided. So then, it's really not on me. That's not what Geno said.
Mm-hmm.
It's on me. I got to do better. That's responsibility. That's accountability. That's leadership. I'll ride with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's another area Geno's doing better than Wilson because I've been watching some of the Wilson post-game press conferences lately just to see what's up, and he's not performing any better there than he is on the field. So yeah, it is a breath of fresh air. You're right.
Yeah, it's Wilson did it for years. It would drive me crazy because it would lead me to believe that Wilson wasn't going to correct what went wrong in a particular game. Yes, I held on to the ball too long, but sometimes good things happen when I hold on to the ball too long. Well, he's not wrong, but it also shows that he's not going to correct into the future that he's going to hold on to the ball too long, being a Russell Wilson in those press conferences he used to talk about that stuff in. And you really need in the quarterback, as some, it may seem silly to some, you need the quarterback just to say, it's on me, I got to do better sometimes. Because more than it being about him being his fault or him to be blamed, it's that it really resounds well with your teammates. And it really endears you to your teammates and it helps you become that leader. And when it's not there, you're going to struggle to then become that leader.
As for making the playoffs, I have a feeling the Giants are going to crash and burn over the next month and a half. And assuming that happens, which, I mean, they play, let me think here. They've got the Eagles twice. They've got the Commanders twice. The Commanders are hot right now. And they've got the Vikings. So I don't know if they get to a winning record. And we own the tiebreaker over them, by the way. So I feel like even though I'm not super confident in Seattle closing this season out super strong, I think they get in anyway just because there aren't that many good teams in the NFC. I think maybe they back in, but I do believe they will get in.
Yeah, like a 3-3, 9-7, I think is what you're kind of prognosticating here a little bit. 3-3 end, which would take us to 9-7. I think what you're also looking at is you see the NFC East teams there, and you're going, well, okay, yeah, those guys are all good record-wise now, but you're down the home stretch, you're going to have them all playing each other. And then that's going to lower down the equivalent level. Like we had this in the baseball this year, right? Where you had the AFC East, right? Where you had the Yankees, Toronto Blue Jays, Baltimore Ravens, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And yeah, all those teams were really good through the year and all really talented. It might have been 4 of the top 7 teams in the American League. But end of the year winds down, they all start playing each other. They start lowering their collective record down, while you on the other side of it don't have those same kind of impingements necessarily. So I do agree with you. I don't think they make the playoffs. I don't think Washington ends up making the playoffs. I think it's going to be the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think we get in there, and maybe there's even one more team in that. I think because you get 3 wild card teams, right?
Yeah, I think Washington gets in. I think the Giants fall out. Looking at the remaining schedules,
Yeah.
like I think the Giants have one more win left, and then I don't know if they find another one.
But I think we both agree
They're
that
really injured right now.
there's not a pathway to getting there for all 4 teams essentially in one division getting the
Yeah,
playoffs. And
that's
that's
true too.
with how many they got to play each other. Just it seems like it's not mathematically really possible as long as we don't completely, of course, lose every single one of the rest of our games.
I mean, that's always a possibility in theory, but we're trying to be realistic here.
It is.
Mhm. Corsos de Gutierrez, thank you for the $4.99. Did anyone see the Pro Bowl votes? I did. Woolen is up by like 12K over Sauce.
Hell
And
yeah.
can we get a damn center and left guard so we put Lewis where he is good and D lineman? All right, so okay, let's start with the Pro Bowl part of this. I did see it. Good for Geno, good for Woolen. I know Brooks is only there because he leads the league in damn tackles, and that's all these voters see. So,
well,
sorry, Brooks. It is what it is.
You were talking about the hopeful that we could build up some of his value. I think on our last show about maybe we could get him for the tackles. You had a Pro Bowl on there. Maybe you can snooker a team into giving you a first, second round pick for the guy at that
or
point.
Does he snooker us into giving him a big contract because he just made the Pro Bowl? That can go either way.
It could. It certainly they paid middle linebackers big money in the past, so that hasn't, in Wagner on a couple contracts. They moved so fast to get out from under Wagner's deal this offseason when they didn't really have to. Leads me to believe maybe they're re-looking at their middle linebacker situation there. But it is great to see Woolen over a Sauce. Maybe the fans are kind of knowing better than the some of the pundits on this one.
They're not competing against each other.
No,
remember,
but he's got more votes. But he does have
more. Yeah,
Sauce is so much. I guess it's in deference to how much Sauce is talked about versus Woolen out there on the national stage. And I hear Sauce, and it's like, and Woolen's good too. But it's good to see the fans who got it, right on this one, in my opinion. Where Sauce having a great year. I know he's got some statistics that he has over Woolen, but for my money, the guy with 5 interceptions as a rookie, shutting down his side of the field and scaring the life of quarterbacks not even throw his way, is your rookie of the year and the better the cornerback play this year, at least. We'll see where they go in the future, but I'll take him at this point.
Yeah, so that's cool. The whole country knows how good Woolen is.
It is cool.
As for the center and left guard thing, I think it's kind of too late for Damian Lewis. I think he's spent so much time now at left guard, and he's actually playing fairly well that at this point, moving him back to right guard would just reset the clock again. So I'm kind of actually thinking he might just be left guard now.
Yeah, of course. I think the other thing that impacts it, I agree that might be a part of this, Brendan. The other thing with it too is that you run into a little bit of the situation of like last year, only so much that you can really attack in an off season. I think the center position is likely to want to be one they draft, but then you have Lewis at left guard, and then you look at right guard, which is an easy position to go out and address in free agency. So you don't have to then take that in the draft. That's the pathway to me that they probably take. You draft the high center in a second round or something, you sign the right guard, you run back with Damian Lewis at left guard. I'm with you, Corsos. I'd like to see Damian back at right, but I just think that's such an easier pathway to go versus you move Damian to right. Now, where do you get your left guard? Is there one in the draft? Because there were none in this last draft, and Zion Johnson has a big bust status already being put on him by many San Diego. I don't agree with it, but many San Diego Charger fans are already kind of going, "Oh, this is busty." So, buyer beware. Yeah,
really?
Again,
okay, I haven't heard that. Wow.
I was seeing some shade being thrown at him here over the last couple of days over there on Twitter with stuff. I don't know, if he's just going through the rookie bumps, maybe the rookie wall. But he was the best guard in the draft at left guard, and it's a specific. It ain't you can't take one right guard, move him to left or whatever. It's so there isn't. Is there a guy in the draft that's going to be a good left guard? Is there? That's where this is all going to kind of impact that decision. But at the end of the day, you need a right guard, you need a center, you have a left guard. That probably informs the Hawks on attacking what they can attack.
Mm-hmm. David Pugh, thank you for the $19.99. This is to give you well-earned money and also to shout out how terrible Brooks is in coverage. If all Brandon can say is his feet got tangled underneath him, then good Lord, make him number 2 or get him off the team. Trent Simpson, please. Yeah. If you brought Jordan Brooks back to the 1990s, he would probably be awesome.
He would.
Like a middle linebacker with that kind of speed back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the era his era is gone.
It's where people were laughing at me a little bit in the, I think I put even a like 5th round type grade at the time he was drafted, which was obviously still probably crazy on my part to give him that, but it was born out of the fact, and I still apply this logic. What is the value of a run stuffing middle linebacker who can't really cover? I mean, for whatever he gives you in the run stuffing element, and that's a bonus, and the tackles are a bonus, and the ranginess and the hitting ability and what he provides, that is that I'm not trying to sell him down the river that he doesn't have some skill. He does. But what is the value of that in the modern NFL era when we are turning into a pass happy league, when teams are attacking your weaknesses on defense? And when you have a gaping weakness like that, Raiders did it in this game. You mentioned that touchdown with the tight end. It's like, let's just get him out. He'll drop into coverage. We're going to run this deep out route here with the tight end. And right when he got to the stem, he lost him. And like I said, yeah, if he just gets right underneath it, wasn't this, the tight end didn't hit him, or, it wasn't offensive pass interference. He just wasn't able to change direction to get to the outside. And it's disconcerting, but yes, it's David. Unfortunately, it's also not that it's gone back to college. I saw it in his final 2 years in college, the same stuff we're seeing right now. And remember, they tried to tell us on draft day that, well, wait, he had 90 pass snaps in coverage in his final year in college, and he didn't have one tip ball, didn't have one play on the ball. What happened there? And we were told, well, no, you had to go look at his previous year's tape. Or we were told, no, he was doing this quarterback spy thing. Yeah. That's the reason why. And those don't turn out to be the reason why. It just is quite simply, it's not where he's comfortable in this game.
Yeah. I have no idea why my webcam just shut off, by the way, but you can still hear me, right?
I can indeed. Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to leave it. I'm not going to worry about it that much. Yeah. And you look at wow, my setup is freaking out right now. One of my friends just died. Oh my goodness. But anyway, okay, I'm just gonna have to do it blind. To assume that you guys can see me and hear me. Yeah, I'm a big Trenton Simpson fan. Definitely. He's my favorite linebacker in this draft.
I like him a lot too. You can put him all over the place. He's a chess piece to be able to utilize. I think he'd be nice in tandem with Adams if he comes back, and you're able to get both those kind of guys around the line of scrimmage, especially for both of their blitzing ability and just a nose for getting to the quarterback. I love it. I think he's got great speed too as well. Pretty good tackler overall. Still need to do a deep dive on him, but I do think right now he's been early on one of my favorite linebackers in this draft.
Yeah, I am going to Vegas in a couple of weeks here.
Ooh.
And I wish there was a way for me to bet money on Seattle drafting at least one Clemson defensive player in this upcoming draft, because that seems like a match made in heaven. You've got Simpson, you've got Murphy, you've got Breeze, and you've got Davis. I think it's Tyler Davis, the defensive end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to happen. Like I would be shocked if it didn't.
Oh, I could see it too. Very Seahawks players, all those guys that you talked about, all with elements of stuff that you've seen with guys on our defense in the past. So I could absolutely see that, and my order would go Murphy, Simpson, Brees, Davis, I think, if we're talking about which ones I like over who.
Yeah, I mean, the Brees thing is weird because he just hasn't played that much football because of what was
injury.
He had some kind of like liver thing. He had some kind of like it was like a serious thing. It was like it almost sounded like his life was in danger, but I guess he's fine.
He is. I think you've seen a little bit of it affect his play on the field this year, and that I don't think he's at his full strength this year coming off of it. And it's going to impact his play, but that's going to be a big pick when we talk about him, Brendan, about trying to project him to being healthy and back to what he was the previous year. And is he going to be able to get back to that previous form of what Brees was the previous year in college?
Right. Let's see. R. Sanchez, thank you for the $2. I don't want Pro Bowlers. I want Super Bowls. I can get behind that.
Me too, Sanchez. It's about building up a team. That's why I say, like with the pass rush, to me, it isn't even about getting a generational pass rusher. It's about getting a plethora of pass rushers, because that's the way you're going to want to run your defense to get it to its most successful state, to get it to the point that it can hold teams down and you can get yourself into Super Bowl contention. So I'm with you, man. I'm not a Pro Bowl or either guy on it, but it is good to see Tariq and some of those guys getting recognized out there league wide for the year that they are having. And it's not just us being homers saying, oh, they're having such good years. No, they're truly having those kind of upper level, seasons to get those kind of votes from the fans. People are taking notice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes Pro Bowlers are the path to get to a Super Bowl. You need a collection of them to get to a Super Bowl. So, and I feel good for the players. If they deserve the accolades, then I'm happy for them. Like, I don't know if Brooks deserves to be the top vote getter in the NFC. In fact, I'm pretty sure he doesn't. But Geno and Woolen, yeah, they deserve that.
And remember too, as much as Pro Bowls don't necessarily matter, Sanchez, if you get a guy like Woolen getting 10 years in this league and he's added one Pro Bowl in his rookie year and he has 8, 9 Pro Bowls, that is a thing that does impact the way people look at whether or not a guy is worthy to eventually get to a Hall of Fame. And so it is important from that matter of things to a degree. But Super Bowls are what we're here for. No doubt about that, man.
Lazy, thank you for the $1.99. Why does Henry To'o To'o remind me of Miles Jack? Henry To'o To'o is probably my second favorite linebacker in this draft, so I'm a big fan of his as well.
I tend to line there as well with him. He's been kind of my second favorite. Part of this has to go born out of with him being number 2 for me, Brendan. That the linebackers in this class have really underwhelmed me, and some of the ones that I've looked at here so far. It's just been there's a list of about 5 or 6 that I just don't. I don't get. I don't get what the hype is behind him or why people are as interested in him. I do with Henry Toto. He reminds you of Miles Jack because he has, that same kind of speed and quickness to his game that Miles Jacks did. Miles Jacks, of course, was a running back even in college at times. And just he had that speed that he provided the linebacking position. I do think Jack was probably a little bit of a bigger guy than Toa. I think Toa is probably an inch or two smaller and maybe 20 pounds lighter than Jack. But still a very good player, a guy that I think is going to get taken lazy in the second round.
Yeah, the guy who really let me down is Sewell at Oregon. He's just too big and slow. He looks like he's 300 pounds out there. I know he's not, but he looks like a defensive tackle.
Well, and then the instinctual wise, it's not there with him. Like he just has no instincts for where the play is going. There's a lot of the Aaron Curry stuff you saw with him as what you see with Noah Sewell or Jordan Brooks, where it's like he wants to buy in on the run fakes and then he can't get back in coverage and zone. And he's fast. He changes direction really quick. That does to a degree stand out, but he is a bigger kind of clunkier athlete at times too within that. It's like he's quick, but he's not fluid necessarily. But yeah, Trent Simpson was the guy we like. Jack Campbell out of Iowa, big clunky athlete. Justin Flo, the Oregon, he's the other linebacker there. The former
I like him more
guy.
than Sewell at this point.
I do too. I mean, at least he's fast, but he's another thing like Sewell where there's just a lot of late reaction and there's a reason this Oregon team isn't doing necessarily amazing this year. And it's like he's despite having guys that are NFL players on their roster.
Yeah.
Late to react. Merlin Robinson, Arizona State. I mean, 6'3", slow instincts. I did like Edifon Ulufosio from Washington. I actually kind of like his game a little bit.
There we go.
So he's a guy I like, but it's been kind of Drew Sanders. I have a lot of people in my chat keep telling me that Drew Sanders is awesome. And I say, okay, give me the game. I got to go watch. and I have yet to get a response on that one. So I'm hoping I'll come around on Drew Sanders because the more linebackers, the better at this point. But the class is looking a little bit lacking overall.
I agree. Y2K, thank you for the $4.99. I'm pissed the Astros got Abreu 3 years switch. Mill was less risky than $330 million, like 8 years for like Turner. Broncos country, let's ride. Yeah, the Abreu thing is not great. I will say though, he's apparently historically been terrible in Safeco Field and again, I'm sorry, T-Mobile Park and against the Mariners. His batting average is like 204. Fun fact.
We got enough guys that kill us like Jordan and Trout in the division. We need a couple more guys that are like kill everybody else, but we kill them. So I take that too. Yeah, it's this ain't going to be easy sledding for the Mariner team going into this offseason. Astros are already the best team in the NFL, in Major League Baseball, and it's not just a team that's got a lot of old guys getting super old. They've got some young guys already on the rise. You add Abreu, that's only going to help them out further. I don't know what the pathway is going to be for the Mariners here. You hear a lot of rumors in a lot of different directions. I like the Hernandez deal to open things off, but they've got to hit this pretty hard if they're going to really hope to compete here with the Astros. Otherwise, we're just kind of treading water.
Yeah. Back to football real quick. One other linebacker I want to throw out there. Have you looked at Ivan Pace yet?
No, but he's on my list.
Yeah, he's kind of doing a Micah Parsons thing this year where he's got over 100 tackles. He leads the team in tackles by far, but he's also a big-time pass rusher. It's a little Micah Parsons-like, so I'm intrigued by him.
Yeah, I'll take a look at him. He's definitely there on my list. I'm just trying to knock out like 2 a day if I can. That's kind of my goal right now to eventually get to that 300 mark.
And since Y2K said the magic words, let's spend a few minutes on this situation over in Denver because it does affect us. It does affect us, and it has affected us in a very, very extreme way.
Indeed, it has. A beautiful, extreme way.
Yeah. So we both thought Denver was going to salvage a W against the Panthers, and instead they played their worst game of the year. They kind of got blown out. They scored a touchdown in garbage time. Just quick preview to give you an idea of how things are going in Denver. The Broncos Chiefs primetime game next week has now been flexed out of Sunday Night Football. It is now an early game. Let's see what else can we say about that Denver situation that sums things up well. So many things you could say. The meme that keeps on giving.
It does. It keeps getting worse and worse. You keep thinking that Wilson and company have found their bottom, and that they just dig another foot deeper. I mean, now you got a defensive lineman, chirping at him, and they can dress that up any which way they want. But former players will tell you about that situation. Go listen to what they say about it. That's not a good look. That's not a good sign. And we already knew this was kind of in the background. You and I have been wondering about when the defense was eventually going to break and say, we've had enough of this. I didn't expect it to take the form of the defensive lineman screaming at Russell from point blank range, but it's going to happen. It's going to eventually get there when you have the defense playing at maybe the best in football and the offense playing at the worst in football. And I'll tell you, Brendan, I do agree with you. I think there's a really great chance we end up with that number 2 pick. I think the number 3 pick is the minimum spot that we finish up at. And I think that this trade will be viewed in the Herschel Walker realm of things. So much of why people will tell you that this isn't anywhere near equivalency to the Herschel Walker trade is because of the fact the players they selected. Well, it's because it's Emmitt Smith and it's Darren Woodson and let's just talk about the picks you got. Let's just talk about
what I'm saying. Yes, thank you.
It has nothing to do with the guys they picked. Yes, they got the draft picks right. That's good. But it has to do with the haul you pulled back. And the haul is like on anything else in NFL history, with the exception of that Walker deal, because it's the haul of the picks in the Walker deal, not necessarily how they used them. So I think it's going to be viewed in that range. You're already hearing people talk about it. I did a video a few weeks ago calling it the heist of the century, and it is indeed going to be one of the greatest heists in NFL history, undoubtedly. Yeah. I mean, and there's so many things. It's not even that. It's also the money that they had to spend, Brendan. It's the money you save, because it was going to cost us $60 million after this NFL season to re-sign Russell Wilson. That's what Mark Rodgers told you.
Not the way he's playing. I'm not giving him any money.
Oh no, but I mean, obviously the coaching staff would have had an antipathy, and I don't think he plays this bad here as he is with Denver. I think he is better, even if to a marginal degree. I think the drop off there has also been built around the coaching and going to a place that doesn't know him and doesn't know how to get the most out of him and doesn't know how to put him in the best position to succeed and doesn't know how to protect him. Those have also been things that have, factored into this, but those picks are going to be so juicy, Brendan. And as I say too, it's the number 2 overall pick in the first round. That's going to be amazing. And you got so many ways you can go and so many directions you can go. And Brendan, we're going to do so many shows on just the little movements. I mean, we could probably end up doing a whole show on just moving back, on just all of the ways of moving back and what historically teams have gotten. So you're going to have a lot of flexibility there. But then remember too, you've got that second round pick at the top of the second round. Then you have almost another first round pick at the back of the second round, which I think a lot of these people, you're pundit wise, Brendan, talk about that first round pick. I think they still kind of forget about the second round pick also being there too. And that's what cements it for me.
Yeah. Have you seen the Tom Pelissero report?
Mm-mm.
Tom Pelissero reported just a little bit ago, actually. Let me read this. Nathaniel Hackett has not lost the Broncos locker room, but Russell Wilson has. Make of that what you will.
Well, you were hearing, I was seeing some Bronco fans putting out on Twitter this last week, well, if we do mark Russell Wilson for a post June 1st designation, it would only cost, it could take it for a $39 million cap hit into the future, where they push the dead money hit into a couple years. So they're already talking about, what, is there any way, Brendan, on this, that the Walmarts just come in and they say, the hell with it? This ain't going to get any better. There's sunk cost. The sunk cost fallacy needs to be applied here. And that we're just going to be throwing out good money with the bad if we continue on down this direction. We just need to now just blow up this bad decision. Is that a possibility? Because everybody's like, well, they're locked into 2027. They just couldn't do any. Is it? Are they? I mean, could they not?
So bad. It's going so bad. I actually think it's on the table now.
I mean, it kind of has to be, doesn't it? They've got to look at it like, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into this next offseason and then we're going to double back down on Russell, quarterback who's looking like he's falling off a cliff. and we're going to talk ourselves into the fact that it was Hackett. No, it was the fact that he was with a new team. Or no, it was the offensive line. Meanwhile, like you said, you've got a locker room that's not buying into him. I mean, if he doesn't have the locker room, how does he remain as that starting quarterback? How do you ever hope to get anywhere with him as your starting quarterback? And if you know you're not getting anywhere with him because he can't be that leader there, it becomes, I think, a real possibility for them there. As crazy as it sounds, as no way they could do that, no way they would do that. I think the Walmarts don't care about signing a big old check and doing what they got to do if it means it's right for the organization.
Yeah, I mean, in order to do it, you must believe that he is such like a cancerous presence on that team that he is like single-handedly dragging everything down significantly to where you're just like, I will pay you 9 figures to go away. Like that is, I mean, the Eagles kind of did it with Carson Wentz, but it wasn't nearly this much.
It wasn't nearly this much, but it wasn't this bad of a situation either. You know, I think Carson Wentz right now has been sitting for the last 4 or 5 weeks in Washington, and he still has more passing touchdowns this year than Russell Wilson does. So, you know, it's gotten that bad, and he's playing like the worst quarterback in the NFL. Not like one of the worst, like he's playing like the worst quarterback in the NFL. And again, there is other stuff that's just not on Russell with this, which is going to make it hard for that Bronco organization to make this assessment because they didn't give him a clean offensive line. Obviously, Gordon Sutton and Jerry Jeudy are not DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. And you lost a lot of guys to injury this year, which definitely impacts this, you know, as well. So, you know, they probably wouldn't go down this road, but I've got to be figuring that it's got to be considered at this point. And if I was in their position, and if I was Brendan, if you were in their position and you had the money to just sign them off and you went, okay, look, I can bleed slowly on this one over the next couple of years, knowing that this is not going to be the right approach, knowing he's not going to win that locker room over, knowing that the money that he's going to cost us is never going to put us in a position to stack the roster any better than we had it this year, any higher than we had it this year. And if that's the case, logically speaking, then why not just pull the Band-Aid off in one fell swoop?
I can't believe we're having this conversation, but it's starting to actually make a little bit of sense that like I think as of right now, if you asked me to rank every quarterback in the NFL, he would be 31st. There's one starting quarterback in the league who I think is worse right now, Kyle Allen.
Yeah.
And he just got the starting job this week. So honestly, he could put together a few good games and I might change my mind.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and look here, think about this too, Brendan. If you released off of him, Broncos could go take a guy like, you know, maybe Bryce Young falls into the first round with that 49er pick, or Hendon Hooker. You know, they could actually go be putting a quarterback in there and then who maybe has an ability to outperform what Russell Wilson's going to perform into next year. Right? At that point, maybe, because let's face it, the bar's not been set very high here by Russ. And if that's the case, as we saw earlier this year, remains the stat that's out there outside of this game, I think, is they scored 18, 19 points in every game with this defense. They'd be like 9-2 this year.
Right.
Can a rookie Hendon Hooker come in there, or a Bryce Young come in there and provide you 20 points a game at that point, or 21 points? That's another part that maybe factors into this. Yes, the dead money would hurt, but is he going to be able to, even if once we get him the great offensive line and we get him another skill position player, okay, now he goes from 31 to 20. Are we still winning at that point? I mean, they don't go this route, I don't think, but I think it has got to be a discussion they're having.
Right. And like I was, you know, this whole leadership thing, like I watched his Wilson's press conference the last two weeks, the last 2 games. And, you know, I usually don't watch those things because they just make me mad for pretty much any player. Like after the Carolina game, did you see what he was saying after that one?
I didn't. No.
I
watched too many Russ press conferences. I can't. Now that he's on the team, like that's one thing I've been able to be relieved of this year.
Yeah, the thing he kept saying was like, it's unacceptable. This offense is unacceptable. And it's like, well, then why does it happen every week? That's what I always say in my head whenever I hear stuff like that. It's like, okay, if it's unacceptable, then why does it happen every single game?
Is that phrase he uses in the way he uses that phrase taking personal responsibility?
Not really.
See, it's born out of that neutral mind stuff, right? It's born out of that, like, don't concentrate on negativity outlook that he's got on stuff, to where keep yourself neutral, keep yourself in that pocket, which I get. And there are benefits to that mindset. I've long offered that he's arrived at the point where he's driven it to such an extreme to that side of things, where it's pushed it so far that it's negating those returns that it could bring, because now he doesn't concentrate on anything that's a negative, when sometimes that's what you have to do in order to fix it. And that's what these chickens coming home to roost for the Broncos are years built up of not paying attention to things that are important as far as your game goes, to expand, to evolve, to get better at. And instead you've kind of just, sat back on it. And so we'll see what he does this offseason. If he does dive back in and maybe really come back to finding that humble pie and understanding I got to just get back in and do the hard work here. And maybe that can help to get him back to another place of being elite again, where it's like, I needed that kind of fall off to kind of get myself recalibrated. Maybe.
I mean, addicts often say they had to hit rock bottom before they realized they needed help. So this year, I mean, that's pretty rock bottom. He's got 9 touchdowns and it's about to be week 13.
It doesn't get worse than this. This is as bad as it gets in that respective thing. So I don't.
Yeah.
It's tough. Yeah. It's tough for the guy. It's not like you said, it's been a meme. It's been every week, bro. It's like something else after something else. You're like, oh, God, you're just waiting for just a pass over. It's like something new, like, oh, Subway commercial, high knees, let's ride. Like just he's calling plays in the deal. He's using hand signs.
Mike Purcell now
yelling at him.
Who is Mike Purcell, by the way? Who is he? Like, is he a big time player on that defense? Because I've never heard of him until now, and he's the guy who's screaming at Wilson.
He's just a nose tackle. He's useful for a 3-4 nose tackle. He knows how to do his job down there, and he's relatively a probably above average player, but not a star or anything like that. But nose tackles don't eat up a lot of stats, so they're not going to pop off the page with that. But how frustrated does he have to be to get to the point where he's doing that? How like that there, there's, as I heard somebody else say, how many times does he walk past Russ, chirping about something and just, I'm going to say something. No, don't do it, to where you finally got to that snapping point to where you're show me another team that's got a quarterback screaming at the players screaming at their quarterback like that. And by the way, not if you do see a quarterback being yelled at like that, it's a receiver yelling at him saying, give me the ball, give me the ball, give me the ball. You don't see a defensive player yelling at the opposition's, yelling at their own quarterback like that. That's Houston. We got a problem. There is a big issue at play here, and they're going to have to deal with it one way or another. I don't know what the answer is. There aren't a lot of easy answers for them. That's for sure.
The Snail, thank you for the $2. If Russ is cut, does he still make the Hall of Fame? I have long dismissed the idea of playing yourself out of the Hall of Fame. If it actually goes to the point where he gets cut, and maybe no one picks, if he actually has to retire after this year, imagine if nobody picked him up. Then he's not getting those longevity stats that I thought he was going to get. He's at 300 touchdowns. 300 touchdowns in the modern NFL is nothing. Pat Mahomes will do that in 6 years. If you gave Pat Mahomes 6 years, he would do that.
Kirk Cousins will end up with probably 400.
Yeah. At that point, I'm thinking, no, if he gets cut, I think there's no Hall of Fame.
I agree. And I maintain if he did as crazy as it would be for him to be cut, if he is cut, let's just say, I know it's crazy to say that would happen, that the Broncos would go down that route. It's not likely to occur. But if he is cut, who's the team that's picking up the phone? Who is it that's trying to dial up his services at that point?
How about the Colts? They love this, don't they? Isn't that the Colts' bag to get these old, past their prime quarterbacks who are probably going to be terrible?
They've gone this route, but I think the Colts are going to leave this season and go, okay, enough of that. We've done this now for 3 straight seasons, and it's failed on us at every single point, and miserably failed. Do we want to go back down that route? And not only go back down that route, but go down that route for a guy who is not legitimate, who's not necessarily in the same place. It makes a little sense, though, to your point, because you have Jonathan Taylor, you have theoretically a run blocking offensive line, which, as I've said to you before, he needs a power running game that can bring a safety into the box, and then he can hit stuff over the top. That's what Russ needs as far as an offense, not the West Coast offense where it's short throws all over the place and he has to be accurate and timely and all that stuff. And he could maybe he could get there on that. Maybe. I mean, certainly their owner's crazy enough to do something like that.
Yeah, that would be the team that I would circle, but maybe they have learned their lesson. You're right. And I mean, I'm sure somebody would pick him up, but would they make him compete for the starting job? Would he go to Detroit and get in a training camp battle with Jared Goff?
It's possible. I mean, it's possible. What do but I agree. I don't think there's going to be a line of people looking to be at his door to pull him in. I think that there's a lot of teams out there that are aware of the deficiencies he has, that are not just born out of he's in a bad situation with the Broncos where they've sold him somehow. They go, no, this is some of the things in his game that have been on wide display for years. Again, as I say, coming home to roost.
Yeah. The way I think this ultimately ends up is that Wilson will make the Hall of Fame, but he will be one of those guys who is always talked about as like the one of the worst players in the Hall of Fame. Like right now, whenever people talk about, the worst quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame, it's always Joe Namath, Troy Aikman, Kurt Warner, and eventually it's going to be Eli Manning. He's going to be with those guys.
I'm not as convinced, bro. I'm not as convinced. The guy doesn't have one MVP vote in his entire career. And it seems like as much as we did love him here locally, nationally, there was some slowness to appreciate his game. And when he was playing at elite, I think he had a very short, real elite time. I think it wasn't anywhere near the 10-year period of being elite.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good quarterback, but was he elite through the first few years of his time here in Seattle? Not really. He was good. He was clutch. He was good in the comebacks. He had parts that were, but elite, I don't know. I don't know if I go to that spot with him in that stage. So I think that if he stays on this track he's on, I think they will find a way to reclaim him a little bit. If he can get another 4,000 yard season and even just one more capable year might be enough to do it in Denver. But if he doesn't get that, if this is it, if this is like, he's going to be like league bad and they'll keep trotting him out there until they finally say, okay, enough. I don't think he gets there at that point. I don't think from a reputation standpoint, it'll be just quite enough.
Yeah. Would you rather be the best player not in the Hall of Fame or the worst player in the Hall of Fame?
Best player, worst player in the Hall of Fame.
Okay. Because I've seen that question get asked before. Like, because if you're the worst player in, everyone talks junk about you. They're like, oh, that guy shouldn't be in there. Whereas if you're the best player not in, everybody spends like their entire life going, oh, that guy's really great. That guy was so underrated. He should get in.
It seems like it does so much for those guys when they do get in and what it does to help them and just what it brings up. I think to call yourself a Hall of Famer, let them talk. I'm a Hall of Famer. Like that's just, they can all talk all they want. That's what I am. As opposed to you're not getting, like I see a guy like, I had that talk with Chad Brown last year in an interview I did with him. And like, I could see the pain in Chad's eyes when I brought up the fact, like, if you just remained as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 defense through your whole career, are you in the Hall of Fame? And he's like, yes. Yeah, I am. Absolutely. And like Seattle brought him here and they moved him back in, as a will linebacker and didn't do as much pass rushing there at the initial point. And it really tempered down his stats from a career standpoint, and especially sacks. And he brought up like Kevin Green is the guy that opposite him that would pass rush. And Kevin Green's the Hall of Fame because he got all those sacks. And he's like, Kevin couldn't do half the things I could do in coverage or anything else. But because he got those sack numbers, he's in. And Chad, I don't think he feels good. I think he feels perfectly fine about getting in there right now. If he was a bag in versus where he is right now, kind of feel like I should be in. I was good enough to be in. I had a good enough career to be in. And I think he did too. He had to do a lot of dirty work stuff that wasn't stat based. And that's hard to account for, especially when he's out there playing in Seattle for the back half of that career. But yeah, that'd be my application of it.
Okay. Taker610, thank you for the $2. Didn't Russ throw 40 touchdowns in 2020? How is this real? Well, the thing that people need to remember is he threw half those touchdowns in like the first 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
There was a huge difference between first 5 game, maybe even first half Wilson and second half Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got a mallet finger in between that time. I've got a subscriber on my channel that maintains she's had it happen to a couple of her fingers, that your fingers are never the same. And when your finger's jacked up on your throwing hand, it's maybe going to be impactful as far as things like accuracy that have jumped out on Wilson this year that haven't always been issues with him. The other thing is that the kryptonite got brought out. Teams sat there through that first half of those years. They're doing a lot of single high safeties, a lot of blitz heavy looks, a lot of leaving Tyler Lockett and DK in one-on-one situations. They went to the cover 2 defense, and Russ didn't really have a way to counter that. And ever since then, he has never had a counter to that. And the counter to that is the short and intermediate passing game, which is a weakness of Russell Wilson's game, quite frankly. So it's one leads to another, and the teams kind of found a solution to what he was doing. And there's not been a counter that he's been able to do. Their counter kind of has him. It's like he's in a triangle in jiu-jitsu and he just can't get the overarm in to try to get an arm bar off or something. There's no counter.
Yeah. Like that Jacksonville game they played in London. When the game-winning drive that Wilson led at the end, was mostly because the first play of that drive was like a 50-yard shot to Hamler because Jacksonville did a single high safety look. And that's the stuff that Wilson eats against.
Yeah.
And, that was a big part of why that drive came together. That's why they scored that touchdown and won that game. Other teams are smart enough to know, we're not going to give him that look, especially not in that situation. But the Jacksonville defensive coordinator had his hand in his pants or something, I guess. I don't know. But it's really that simple.
It's really that simple. That's because he's not going to take the checkdowns. I mean, how many screenshots did we see over the years of him just completely ignoring a guy out in the flat who's got no defender near him? I mean, you see defenses just pulling back in waves with their zone coverage to take away the deeper stuff. And he's got to start attacking that short stuff. He's done a little bit of a better job in Denver this year with that to a degree, I guess. But it seems like something they try to pepper in a little bit, and it's really just kind of for show more than it is for go. And he can't stay with it over a course of a full game.
Right. And just to kind of put a bow on the whole Denver discussion, like I said, I believe Denver's losing out now. I think that team's kind of quit, and they're clearly never going to fire Hackett. They're never firing Hackett midseason because they would have done it by now. Maybe the only thing that could make it happen is if they lose by like 50 points to the Chiefs and it becomes just embarrassing and they have to. But I don't think they're going to fire him. So there's no way like Dom Capers comes down out of the booth with his walking stick or what do they call those big walking stick things?
I know
the walker
with the tennis balls on them.
Yeah. And motivates that team into trying a little bit harder and he gets something out of them. That's not happening. They're stuck with Hackett, even though I don't know what he does because they've taken away play calling and they've taken away game management. I think he's just, if they office spaced him and they asked him, what would you say you actually do around here? I don't think he could answer it.
I'm a GD motivator. I motivate men.
Yeah. But I believe Denver's losing out. And I've done the math. If they lose out, I think we are guaranteed a top 2 pick.
I agree. I do. I think 3 is minimum. And I think there's a very real trek to getting the number 2 because they are they're not beating the Chiefs. That's 2 games. You're gone. You're not beating the Ravens, who just lost this last week, who are going to be hungry in that game and need that win. That one's out. I don't know how they even beat teams like the Cardinals or Rams right now. Those teams are maybe the Rams because the Rams, as we're going to do on Thursday on our look through, are just suffering so many kind of injuries across the board, especially to really, really good players. That might open them up on that one, maybe. But even that is no guarantee with where they are playing. And they just lost to Carolina.
I got 5 words for you. Sean McVay versus Nathaniel Hackett.
Oh, there we go. Hey. I especially because he knows how to play Russ. That's the thing with Sean McVay is he also understands through playing him those years exactly what defense to adopt to give him a hard time and make things really difficult on him. So that's probably part we should think about with this too. McVay's on it with that type of stuff.
Yeah, Chicago's strength of schedule is actually really high. So if they lose out and Denver loses out, I believe Denver picks ahead of Chicago. So I believe it's pretty much guaranteed we would get 2 if Denver loses out.
There we go.
And I believe they will. So, I mean, it's the highest we've ever picked, right? We picked 2 with Rick Meyer.
Yep.
And have we picked number 2 before? It would be the inaugural draft, I think we did.
Yeah, that was, what was his name? He's got one, I forget his name, but yes. Niehaus, I believe.
Dave Niehaus. Wow.
Dave Niehaus. Yeah, Niehaus was I think the number 2 overall pick.
Very
so
nice.
It's amazing place to be, Brendan, because the higher you are up, I mean, and the place that I land mostly as I stand right now, above even taking Carter or Anderson, is to move back 6 or 7 spaces because of the absolute haul you pull back, and you just keep. I've referenced this like rubbing the genie lamp and being like, I wish for more wishes. That's essentially what we're getting to do if we can move back a little bit.
I feel like teams are starting to learn you don't give up massive assets to move up in the draft. Like last year, teams were not trading up, and the ones that didn't give up that much to do it.
The reason the teams didn't do it last year, Saints did. They made one hell of a stupid trade to do it. And also, let me add on.
They didn't give up massive assets, did they? They just gave up too much for a garbage player that nobody wanted.
I would offer the only reason you didn't see it this last year was that there wasn't a quarterback to necessitate those kind of trades. And so you're going to see that, I think, this year. By the way, San Francisco just did it a couple of years ago.
True. So that was a couple like last year felt like the year when teams knocked that off. I feel like I could be wrong. I feel like teams last year were like, okay, we're not giving up our entire farm for one player.
that it came on a year that was kind of a historically bad quarterback draft, considering the recent quarterback drafts that have come along, I don't think that's a coincidence. And I
Okay.
do think, I do think that if there's a team out there that falls in love with Will Levis at number 2, or maybe even Bryce Young, it just all, as I say, Brendan, it just takes one team. Doesn't take 5, it takes one team, and the going rate is the going rate. It doesn't take a bidding war. You want to come up here, this is the cost, and it is a high cost.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Like, there are so many things we could do that I would be totally cool with.
Mm-hmm.
CJ Stroud, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, trade back a few spots and get Miles Murphy, trade back a little further than that and get, I don't know, Keely Ringo or, uh, you know, maybe Trenton Simpson. I don't know if I would take him that high, but like there are so many things you can do. The only thing I don't want to do is spend a top 10 pick on Bryce Young. That's the only thing I can think of that
Agreed.
we could do that I don't want to do. If we did that, I'm not thrilled. But anything else is like, yes, let's go.
I'll be pretty much happy same way. As even with some of the stuff on Anderson, I said I would still be completely excited if we took him. So I've got worries and reservations, but you've got a huge ceiling on this guy, which is just what you want
Yeah.
for the number 2 pick.
Yeah, and we got to remember there's no such thing as a literal can't miss prospect.
No,
Every guy has some sort of bust quotient. Maybe Will Anderson's is a little higher than Jalen Carter's, but every player is going to have some bust possibility. Closest thing I've ever seen to a player with no bust potential is like, I don't know, Andrew Luck. I remember thinking like, there's no way that guy isn't going to be great, but
yeah, I thought that too. I thought even a guy like Ndamukong Suh coming out. I mean, was he going to be a game wrecker, Aaron Donald type? No, not. But you knew he was going to be a hell of a player coming out. I mean, there's some guys that do come along like that, but you're right. There's always questions. And somebody mentioned in my chat, I think this is also valid. You have a guy that knew last year he had put enough tape up there to become near to being the number 1 overall pick, not the number 1, but close enough.
mm-hmm.
And then maybe there's a little bit of protecting yourself coming into this year a little bit. Because I feel like I heard some of the same stuff about Chase Young and the same stuff about Nick Bosa as they went into their final years and they were being viewed so highly that maybe there's a little bit of that. You take your foot off the gas because you are trying to protect yourself. You've got millions at stake here. Maybe you don't quite go as hard playing and play out as you did that previous year. But once you get the NFL level, it'll be more of a turn it on kind of situation. There's maybe some validity to that.
Mm-hmm. David Pugh, thank you for the $4.99. Shout out from Houston, Texas to chicken enchiladas with black beans and pico de gallo.
That's
Best
good.
food on earth. Can't
Hell
tell me
yeah.
otherwise.
I wouldn't.
That is pretty good. I like beef enchiladas more than chicken enchiladas, I'll be honest.
So you leave me with the beef because it's always chewy. It's always got that cartilage thing going where you pull the beef and it's got the cartilage pull to it, like an accordion. No, thank you. The chicken's nice and just pulls right off. Nice and
I get the ground beef, so you don't get that.
Okay. Ground beef, you got me with that. I'm with the ground beef. But I'm talking about when they do that stupid like steak. Yeah, the worst kind of steak basically they choose to put on those sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, I can dig it.
I'm with it,
Even
David.
with chicken, I'm with it.
I'm with it all day.
Ran in the cut. Thank you for the $4.99. Russ is done. We made our offense all about Russ. Yeah, I said this last week, but if you're trying to guess whether or not Wilson rights this ship, I do not believe he will. I think he will be better than he was this year. I don't think he's ever going to get back to being a good quarterback. I could see him being like a below average one or maybe even an average one. I don't think he's going to get back to good.
Agreed. 100%. I think Ray in the cut, there's a lot of truth to what you say in that. I think some of the bitterness that you've seen at times from Coach Carroll leak out at times this year in little things that he'll say like armbands or hell yeah, boo him in the first game. I think those have been born out of a little bit of, I built this all for you. I gave you everything. I disassembled my vaunted defense to go and put everything kind of to you with this. And now, you come at the end of this and really end up kind of screwing us over to a degree in how you walk out the door. And, maybe that's real imagined or whatever, but I think that's why Carroll's been a little bit willing at times to throw that shade.
Yeah.
And I don't think another coach is ever going to put things together as much for Russ as he had here in Seattle. Even Denver, with all the resources they gave, I don't think they ended going into this offseason saying, "Oh, let's make it all Russ now. We'll throw it." And instead, they go, "We'll give him some stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but then we're going to get through year 2 of this deal, and then we're going to get to a little closer of an end of being able to make maybe more of a hard decision to make at that point." But agreed with you, man, completely.
Yeah. I mean, he's got to lock himself in a room this offseason and study tape and figure out how to read a defense and do stuff pre-snap. And even if he does that, he could get hurt again. His body could break down. Lord knows it's already starting to break down. Like, there's so much that has to go right for Wilson to get back to where he was or even close. I don't think it's smart to bet on it.
I don't either. And it's not like the Broncos have a clear pathway to do, for instance, how are you going to clean up your offensive line? You have multiple needs across that offensive line. Where's it going to come from? You're down in your second round pick. You've got San Francisco's first, so you're going to put in the offensive line. But you also then weaken your defense by Bradley Chubb then moving on. So now is your defense a little weaker to do that? And you don't have a lot of money to spend. So who are you going to go get in free agency? Who's going to want to come there in free agency with that situation where it's at? I don't see the easy fix here. I don't see the straightforward fix here. You're not going to get Sean Payton, for instance. He ain't going to come play with Russ. He's going to Chargers. You got a choice between Herbert or Russ. You think he's picking Russ?
Not even a consideration.
Not even.
And also, I think you have to trade for Sean Payton because the Saints still have him, and the Broncos don't have picks.
Bingo.
Yeah. I've heard apparently they're going to get Dan Quinn. That's not helping Wilson, by the way.
No, this is where the situation has gotten ridiculous, Brendan. Like I told you, I swear to God, I think what this was is him and his people made overtures about Schottenheimer. And then the Broncos were like, we don't want Schottenheimer in here. Is there anybody else that's worked with him that could be a coaching candidate that we can who can find some secret sauce, get the magic out of him, just squeeze it out of him somehow? Well, I mean, Quinn's still kind of a highly, thought of guy. He's going to get a job at some point. Okay, Quinn. And some of that's also who's the coach you're going to get, prime coach. Who's the prime offensive mind? Brendan, let's really think about this.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And if it did, who would want to come there and do that? Who would want to come take on this situation to fix something that there does not look like an easy fix, even if you were a genius level IQ coming into that situation?
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll get Shane Waldron. Did you see Coward throw that out the other day?
Oh, yeah, Coward's he's scrambling right now, man. He's scrambling, he's scuffling because his rust takes are aging like, cheese, basic's it's great to see. And he's trying to backtrack and go, because for a while it was all Hackett's and it always this other stuff. And now he's kind of have to finally go, well, yeah, he's playing bad. He is.
Yeah, I mean, Hackett's bad for a lot of reasons, but his play designs are not bad. You're seeing the receivers get open every game, and Wilson just doesn't make the right read. Like, the play designs are not bad. The play calling is bad. The discipline is bad because they have all those penalties. The preparedness is bad. You can, some of that stuff is Hackett for sure, but the play designs are fine. Wilson should be able to execute those play designs, and he doesn't.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think Hackett's quite as bad as where they're all positioning. Maybe he's not qualified to be an NFL coach, but I don't think he's forgotten how to put an offense together in just one off season there. And, the stuff you've heard from Bronco fans, the same from Seahawks fans, but what you've heard from Bronco fans, and I see it on Twitter with their comments and everything else, it's the same kind of criticisms that you heard of Russell Wilson through his years here too. Holding on to the ball too long, like you said, missing reads. This stuff just happened too often. It occurs and it still occurs. And I've said he can correct it. It's fixable, Brendan. You can fix getting your reads right. You can fix going right, but it does take, as you just said, that lonely work, getting in that dark office, bringing in guys that can help get that postdoctorate type work that you need to have put into play to get yourself there in your game. And would he do that? Would he have the humbleness to do that? Would he have the recognition that he needs to do that? Or would he just do that thing of like, well, I had a bad year this year, but I've had a lot of good years too.
Yeah, I think we know the answer to that one. And I mean, if he's going to lock himself in that room and do that lonely work, that means giving up a lot of stuff he was probably thinking about doing in the off season.
No Rome and Italy trip, no friends trip, no
going to the moon with Elon Musk,
right?
No starring in a movie.
Yeah, no minor leagues with the New York Yankees, whatever else there is they got going on, some movie he's trying to make, whatever else it is.
Mm-hmm. Andrix A, thank you for the $1.99. Can we make playoffs and get that top 2 pick? I believe we will. That is my prediction. I think we do both those things. How about you?
100. I think both occur, Adrian XA. I think 3-3 gets you in the playoffs. I think this team can at least get 3 wins carved out through the remaining portion of the schedule. And I do believe that, as me and Brendan have talked about here with this Adrian XA, that you look at that schedule of the Broncos, it is so tough. And there is no easy peasy wins there. They had their opportunity this last week and they blew it. you're gonna kind of at this point in time, they're gonna lose out, and that does give us that number 2 pick. So I think both are very, very likely to occur.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Denver would have an easy win against anybody. You'd have to go down to a college team to find them an easy win because they can't score.
Right. I agree. I mean, the Cardinals game, for instance, which is theoretically a winnable game, but Cardinals have been good. Everybody against us, we played them really good. They're playing a lot better against every other team that's not a Seattle Seahawks team. And
Oh, they're going
so,
to throw so many funky blitzes at Wilson. You know they
oh,
love that stuff.
there's another defensive coordinator who's given Wilson problem. Your point, given Wilson problem through the years, and has been a thorn in his side. And so now, yeah, that guy's going to know just how to attack Wilson in that game. Yeah, well said, man. Well said.
Yeah. Also, Andrick, say thank you for the $1.99 again. I was late, but WTF happened this past Sunday. I think the quickest way to sum it up would be this defensive line is not good, and everything stems from that.
I think that's a good way of putting it, Adrian XA, is that you or even be just to add a little bit on more beyond what Brendan said, you got your butts whooped on both lines of scrimmage. And football, though it is a game of intricacies and details and matchups and all of that stuff, it can get very simple very quick. And that is that if you lose the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football, you're very likely to lose the football game in addition to it. Those things do tend to kind of go together. If you draw kind of a neutral thing where each side sort of has their moments in the game, then it can become more about those matchups and everything else. But when the beginning point is you're just getting your butt whooped across both boards there, hard to not look at anything but that as your reasoning as to why you lost. Right. I do want to say too, sorry, Adrian XA also made some donations on my last stream. Sorry if I missed some of your, I had a lot of donations. I did my 10K. So we had a lot of people putting donations in, and I think I might've missed one or two on with him, Adrian X. So sorry if I missed you on your donations on the channel on my live stream last time, but thank you for donating to Brendan. And
you made 10K. Yeah. Someone actually came to my stream and mentioned that you had gotten to 10K. So awesome. 5 figures. Let's go.
Let's go. 5 figures, baby. It feels good, man. It feels a little different once you get 10K. It's a little, this is what it's like up here, huh, Brendan? Okay.
Yeah.
It's nice in here. I like this. It's warm and comforting. It's okay.
Yeah. Just got to keep on stacking.
Keep stacking it, man. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, the rest of the offense, we already kind of defended Geno. Obviously the receivers played fine. Metcalf, Lockett, Goodwin. I think they all played fine. Technically Metcalf had a drop, but yeah. Tight ends, not great. Fant blew the chip block and Disley had the drop. Not great.
And they were kind of, if you look at the PFF scores, that was part that jumped out to me, is that most of the games this year, especially games you've won, your tight ends have been 3 of your top 10 offensive performers in PFF scores. And this game stood out to me in that you had none, I don't think any in the top 10 of any of the 3 tight ends. And so everybody kind of had a little bit of a rough day at the office.
Yeah. Rough day for Ken Walker, but I can't put too much of it on him. I don't think he was doing anything that wrong. Blythe, and I would even throw Gabe Jackson in there. Just they can't do this.
Jackson actually was, not great. He was okay. And then Haynes had a horrible game in this one for his.
Maybe I got them switched up.
It wasn't that he didn't have a great game. Jackson didn't have it was like, okay, 60, and like Haynes was like a 45 or something grade. Just, absolutely abysmal, not doing anything at all. And so, yeah, I don't look at anything on Kenneth Walker in this game either. That's your line's got to get holes created for running backs. You can't expect the guy to dance through everybody in order to get out there and make a touchdown like he did on that touchdown. The touchdown he had just like we had a couple weeks ago, where it's like hardly anything's blocked upright. He just dances his happy ass around the side to get into the end zone at the end. Yeah.
I believe we have the lowest run block win rate in the NFL.
That sounds right.
And the reason why we're still running the ball okay is because when we successfully run block, Walker's doing such a good job dancing around and getting crazy yards anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. When you get your big plays, you get real big plays. So
he truly is Barry Sanders.
He is. He's a very Barry Sanders running back in what he's doing right now. And like Barry dealt with bad offensive line play, which was why you had a lot of those negative yard run plays. It wasn't just, you dances too much. No, it's because it's because the guys are not allowing too much penetration, and you can't do that in the running game like this. It's going to throw the whole situations off. So hopefully they can improve, but unfortunately that's another one of my enigmas, Brendan, where I just think the interior line's not, it's going to be is what it is for the rest of the year.
Yeah. I'm giving Lucas a pass.
Mm-hmm.
He was sick. He was playing against Max Crosby. We didn't help him as much as we should have. We didn't help him the right way. PFF gave him 2 sacks allowed and 6 pressures allowed, which is not good, but I don't really think much of it.
Agreed.
Cross, they actually said allowed 7 pressures, which I have to admit I didn't see it watching the game.
Yeah, I didn't see that
But
either.
0 sacks allowed, 0 penalties. They actually gave him a pretty decent grade for the game, so I think Cross did fine.
Agreed. I saw the same thing. I didn't think it was anywhere where Lucas was. And the flu thing, yeah, you got the flu and you're going up against one of the preeminent. I mean, the guy is going to be in talk for DVOA, Defensive Player of the Year. So
I think he's making the All-Pro team.
he's going to make All Pro too. So it's not like he's out there being beaten by some weak-kneed guy. It's like that's the toughest as the competition gets out there in the NFL, and you're not at your best. I don't know if you've had the flu. I couldn't be out there going up against some 605 monster. It's just,
I almost never get sick. Before I got what I suspect to be COVID, but I'll never know. I got COVID earlier this year. I hadn't gotten sick in like 4 years, I think. But when I get sick, I'm complete shut it down. I'm not doing anything.
Me too. I just sleep. I couldn't imagine going out for 60 snaps on the, I gave a try of snowboarding once, and I was having like started bronchitis trying it for the first time. And I was like, the hell with it. I gave up 10 minutes in. I'm like, no. So props to him for making it through, for getting it out.
Yeah. So I think the play calling was mostly good. There was that one dumb drive where we went wide receiver screen, run up the middle, wide receiver screen. Like it almost felt like, I said this in my video, it felt like we thought our third string quarterback was in the game and we were just trying to protect him.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the heck that was about, but yeah, the offense, I'm really just looking at that center position and to a certain extent right guard. That's where I think this game fell apart offensively, if anywhere.
Yeah, that Billings guy for the Raiders he was controlling shop down there inside. I mean, they weren't able to do anything with him. I was okay with the offensive play calling. You put up 34 points. Waldron did a fine enough job. I do still maintain run more fly sweeps. They ran one fly sweep again. It's like they want to run it one a game. It's like they got to run one cursory one a game. And again, with Marquise Goode, when they run it, they get like 8 yards with it. Run it, run the play. It's a really effective play. And when you can't run, I would just think, Brendan, when you can't run between the tackles, when you can't run up over the A gap, yet you can get 7 free easy yards by just any time you might want to run a fly sweep, maybe start to do that a little bit more, and in order to jumpstart the running game at least just a little bit.
Yeah, you can even do it with Ken Walker. He's done that. He did a fly sweep earlier this year, right?
Yeah, it works when you use it. Brendan, if we went back, if we had the stats over the last 2 to 3, even 3 years of the times they've utilized the fly sweep, I swear to God, we've averaged 8 yards a carry with it. But we only have ran it over 3 years, probably 25 times.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating because it's such a staple of really good offenses in this league and the way they use it. And it opens other things in the offense like those A gap runs, because you start to stretch those gaps out and now stuff's a little more opened up. The linebackers have to go that extra step to the side as that fly sweep's coming so they can get to the receiver if he gets the ball. And that then opens up the middle. So it'd be nice to see them use it. But other than that, play calling was on it. Like you said, it wasn't perfect. It was good. You had, I think, consistent drives throughout the whole day. It was very rare any kind of 3 and outs. And you put 34 points up on the board. That's good enough to win.
Yeah. Let's see here. Just clean up the last couple super chats here. Lazy, thank you for the $1.99. We never got to see Russ versus Brian Flores. I could see Flores getting a DC job again at some point.
I could too. It would depend on see if he gets blackballed for doing the suing thing, because that can sometimes the NFL can be kind of punitive with that sort of stuff. I mean,
they couldn't blackball him out of the league completely. At least he's got a job right now, so I would be inclined to believe he could. I will say Mike McDaniel's making him look a little bit silly right now because he's gone into that Miami situation and done so much better.
It's true. He's taken basically somewhat of a same roster there. And, there's some key things that have been helpful, but, certainly he's wrapped his arms around Tua, and Brian was not wrapping his arms around Tua based on what we were hearing. So there's definitely a big part of that within this as well. And yeah, it'll probably, but definitely a DC. He'll get a defensive coordinator probably position somewhere.
A and Say, thank you for the $1.99. We lost to Crybaby Carr. I'm not insulting David Carr right now. He could have gotten knocked out at the start of that game, like when Nwosu hit him in the ribs and he went down. I was like, okay, that's it for him today. But no, he came right back in and played a good game. So I'm not insulting Derek Carr right now. I got to give him some credit.
Yeah, it's a gritty performance from Derek. I mean, he went out there with that rib shot and still went back out there and threw for 300 yards, and he didn't really beat you at the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you give up 230 yards on the ground to a running back. that's your game over right there. Much like getting your ass whooped on the offensive line on both lines of scrimmage, having a running back at 240 on you. I was asking this question and I posed it to you, Brendan. It's like, can you remember a time when a running back had 240 yards and lost the football game, his team?
That would be an interesting stat to look up.
Yeah, but I would say we would probably come to find that that's not the case. Teams
Yeah.
are running the ball, they're probably winning because they're up on the game. You get behind in the game, you can't run the ball enough to get 230 yards. So yeah, that's what you lost. Carr did fine. He certainly got through, but it was the running game that just absolutely wrecked you in this one.
Yeah, and I think that's about all there is to say about this game. Defense bad, offense good. Hopefully things get a little bit better, but it's going to be hard for it to get a lot better because we are in week 13 of the NFL season and the die is cast. But life is still good, right? As a Seahawks fan, life is good.
You got a pathway to the playoffs, a pathway to the number 2 overall pick in the draft. It doesn't get better as an NFL fan to be able to look at those kind of markers up ahead.
There's an alternate timeline where we have like 2 wins right now with Wilson at quarterback, and we're all prepping to just dump him for like a 4th rounder in the offseason.
Bingo. Or yeah, absolutely well said on your part with that, where there is no value to get anything back from him. And you're just like, well, we'll get out from a lot of his contract, but you don't have Charles Cross at that point. You don't have, I guess, Mafe at that point, So yeah, it's, we've worked out. This has worked out the best case scenario as this season could have played out, in my opinion. Even with last week's loss, it certainly is the case. This is the best case scenario for this year. And you said at the start, I want to echo what you said at the start. Entertaining game. Another game. We've had so many games over recent years that weren't entertaining, that were slogs to get through, which were just painful, root canal-like experiences from a viewership standpoint. But every game this year has been fun. It sucks that your defense gives up that many yards and points, but it's fun to watch. The game kept me entertained. It kept me on the edge of my seat all the way through from start to finish, as every game kind of has this season.
Hey, and there's something to be said for that. We do watch this sport to be entertained somewhat,
Bingo.
right?
I do. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right. So we got about 250 people in here. We've had around 250 for a while now. So thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight to watch Brendan and Brandon talk about these Seahawks. We will do it again on Thursday. I believe we're doing it on this channel still because we were over on his channel for a little while because of my situation. So we will be previewing this Rams game in a couple of days. So buckle up for that because this is going to be the first time in a while talking about these Rams is actually fun as a Seahawks fan. Usually you're sitting there just terrified of what Aaron Donald's going to do to you. Now he's going to be wearing a suit on the sideline, maybe.
And then no Cooper Kupp as well. In addition to that, no Van Jefferson, no Cooper Kupp, no Allen
Stafford,
Robinson.
no Ashawn Robinson.
Yeah. And no Allen Robinson too, is there?
Both Robinsons done for the year.
Yeah. So it's going to be set up pretty nicely for us. You're right. We got to speak about this one even after last week's game with a little bit of optimism.
Right. To anybody who may be interested, I will be going live on Twitch later tonight. We're going to do more Judgment. So come check me out if that's intriguing to you. If you haven't already, please like the stream on your way out. Hit the sub button. Go over to Brandon's channel. He is the Hawk's Nest over on YouTube. He just hit 10,000. I think he's now at 10,100 actually. Yeah. So he's on to the next obstacle, right? Now we're going for 11,000.
That's right.
And you're just going to keep moving up, right? Like there's no limit to numbers, people. The numbers go on infinitely.
They do indeed. They do indeed. And the closer we get doing it for me, it's the closer I get to do this more and more as kind of almost a full-time like gig, which really gets me excited.
Oh yeah. So everybody go do those things. I will see you guys in the very near future. Brandon, I will see you again on Thursday. Thank you for coming out and doing this with me.
Thanks for having me.
And obviously things are not as good as they've been earlier this season. It's not the best week, but there's still a really important thing that needs to be said here before we sign off.
Very important.
We say it every week, but there's a reason why we say it every week. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.